Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's ATACS Game of the Year podcast. We are now at day 2. That's right. We loved it. It was a Game of the Year podcast so nice we had to do it twice. And we'll probably do it thrice as well. I'm your host, Paul from Atlanta, and I got the same crew joining me today as we had yesterday, Mr. Flex from Raleigh. How's it going, Flex?
I survived to the dawn of the second day.
You survived to the dawn of the second day. Also, we all have Mr. Nate from Wendell, North Carolina. What's up, Nate?
You nailed it.
I nailed it.
I have caught cold, so I'm going to try to not be sniffling into the microphone too much.
All right.
If you cough, then you lose your argument.
Well, there goes all those games. And then we have, last but not least, Mr. Ryan from New York, New York. How's it going, Ryan?
I didn't survive, and I'm a zombie now.
Oh.
So you're a regular New Yorker then?
So.
Being vengeful and spiteful does not make you a zombie.
Oh boy.
So we're changing up things a little bit for day 2. Day 1 ran a little bit longer than what we were expecting, but we're still going to try and make this as enjoyable for you as we can. The categories that we're going to try to hit today are the best looking game, the best narrative, our most surprising game, and our most disappointing game. We have several other categories beyond that we're probably going to save until day 3. We'll just have to see where time goes and how time goes, because you never know where time's going to go. And same blanket warning today that we had yesterday. There will be some spoilers. We will do the best that we can to try to avoid them, but if you're looking for a spoiler-free Game of the Year cast, this is not it. We're also changing a little bit of our games that we're talking about. We've censored games that we just want to give quick shout outs for versus games that we actually want to have longer discussion for. So the first, set of games in any of these categories, we're just going to go through very quickly and, give it 20 or 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on and get right down into the meat of all the things that we're going to fight about for a long time. So, quick mic check. Am I still sounding okay to everyone?
You cut out for a second.
You cut out for a few seconds, but I think the gist of what you were saying got across.
All right. Well, if that keeps happening, then I don't know what we'll do. So
we'll wing it.
The moderator.
I do have a second microphone on my computer I can switch over to. So if that keeps happening, just flail around and let me know.
I apparently have like 10 microphones now.
Yeah.
You have many microphones.
I have a lot of microphones.
You should send me one. All right, so we're going to start out with our best looking game. These are the games that we think that just have a great look. And this could be technical, this could be artistic, it could be stylish, and it's a pretty broad category. So we're going to jump into our shout out section. Mr. Flex, talk about Abzu for us.
Abzu it definitely fits more in the artistic and stylish end of things, but man, it looks good. Like, that thing's often talked about as like an underwater Journey, and Journey, for my money, is one of the best looking games around, artistically speaking. And I think Abzu does a lot of what makes that cool. Like, you're underwater, it's very colorful, and like they render those fish really coolly, and you're just seeing like a lot of great underwater life, plants, and coral reefs, and just a bunch of different kinds of fish, and like it is a visual splendor. Like, that game, I mean, that's as close as you get to a painting in motion in video games. I think it looks really awesome.
All right, so moving on from Abzu, the Banner Saga 2. Mr. Ryan, tell us about Banner Saga.
Yeah, if you played the first Banner Saga, then you're already pretty well versed in the look of the second one, and it kind of continues that art style. I think that's inspired by Evan Earl, an American artist. So it has a really cool, kind of classic animated style. Thumbs up. Still looks good.
Darkest Dungeon, Mr. Flex.
I love just how gritty and gnarly everything about the art in that game is. Like, I mean, that game's kind of meant to be just this horrific Cthulhu-esque nightmare from start to finish, and like on a technical level it's not that impressive, but man, does that art go places and do things. Like, it looks really cool, and even like some of the combat animation and stuff is, like, I think really neat. I think that game has a great look to it.
Oh, all right. Mr. Nate, you put down Fury.
Yeah, I think Fury looks pretty cool. It's got sort of a cel-shaded anime style about it. Lots of over-the-top character design and environments. Like a good chunk of that game is literally walking through environments, and some of those are pretty neat just visually. And then obviously the rest of the game is just boss fights. So I think the character design definitely holds up in that game. It's visually striking, if nothing else.
Okay, and Ryan, Mobius Final Fantasy is a mobile game, so what was it that made you want to shout that game out?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I wanted to shout it out, is because, like I mentioned yesterday with the sound, like, it's a catchy mobile game, but the most, I mean, in terms of visual quality, it had full 3D models, like pretty cool character designs, like pretty cool art. So just overall surprising and high quality sound and audio and visual.
Okay. So moving into the completely opposite realm from mobile games, Overwatch has probably been one of the biggest PC releases of the year with its own distinct art style. Nate, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, Overwatch, pretty much if you're on the internet, you know about its characters. They have so much personality, very distinctive looks, and just everything about their animation and all the different skins you can get, I think just adds a ton of flavor to that game, which people have really picked up and run with. So I think that game deserves a mention. It looks really good.
You could dress Lucio up as a hockey man.
That's right.
Yeah, they definitely do quite a bit there with the different costumes and shaders and everything else, which is pretty neat. Flex, tell us about Owlboy a little bit.
Your boy who's an owl?
All right.
Yeah, this game has a really nice, like, touching personal story about. I won't say it's quite a fully coming of age story, but like Owlboy, he's trying his best to be the best Owlboy he can be. Like, owls form, like, they have a very specific role in that universe, and he's finding his way, and like the friends he makes along the way and the mistakes he makes and the things he tries to accomplish. Like, it's a very touching tale of this boy, navigating life, so to speak. And like, it's a very heartfelt story that I think that this is one of that game's strength, and like I think they pull it off very nicely. Like, it's pretty touching.
Okay. So Nate, tell us about Salt and Sanctuary. What was it that made you put that down here?
Wait, I totally lost my mind. We're doing best looking.
I figured you were just running in.
I gone crazy. Yeah, so sorry. Quickly, it has a very like painterly, like, it's almost like a 2D Wind Waker style. Like, it's very artistic and like, it carries the whimsy very well, and it just looks nice. Like, the animation's really smooth too. I think it's a really nice looking game. And now you've already heard my story shout out.
That's okay. You'll just edit that in later for whenever I just throw it back to you for the next category. All right, so Nate, Salt and Sanctuary.
Yeah, Salt and Sanctuary's got a cool look to it. Everything's very gray and dim and sort of foreboding. The lighting in that game is probably one of its strong suits. And then it just has good boss design and good enemy design, I think. Like, a lot of those bosses are pretty gnarly. But yeah, it sort of takes the sort of bleak Dark Souls style, but does it in a slightly more cartoony way, which I think is pretty cool.
All right. And then the last game that we just wanted to shout out very quickly is one that I put on here, Stardew Valley, which we're going to talk about more later. But the art style for that game is very endearing. It's definitely the 16-bit SNES style graphics, but look at that through like a more modern lens, and it's very crisp. It's very nice, and like I said, it's a very cute art style. It's so cute, and I really think that it's it pulls off charm in a way that is it's just really, really evident with its graphical style, pretty much from the first time that you end up loading up the game. So those were our games that we just wanted to shout out very quickly before the bloodletting begins. So for our heavy hitters, for our contenders for best looking game, I'm gonna go down and read the list real quick, and we'll see where it goes. We've got Doom, Final Fantasy 15, Firewatch, Forza Horizon 3, Hyper Light Drifter, Inside, Titanfall 2, Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, The Witness, and Superhot.
Those are some good-looking games.
Those are some good-looking games.
Games look good, y'all.
A lot of good-looking games in 2016.
I don't even know where to start on this list.
I know where to start.
Where's that?
Are you going to start with Doom?
No. I mean, I can start with Doom wins this category if you want.
Yeah, no.
I was going to start with Forza Horizon 3. This is one of my 3 favorite looking games of the year, but if Nate's not with me, it's not going to make top 3, but I think this game looked like the world they have rendered for you to drive around in this game looks incredible. And there's a lot of just really gorgeous vistas you get to overlook in this game.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I have to pull back a little bit sometimes because I think I favor more artistic stuff way more strongly than the technical stuff, but that game still looks real good.
If this category was best looking game technical, this would make this list.
Yes, it would. 100%.
Yeah,
I agree.
it's in an open world version of Australia, and you got deserts, you got lakes, rivers, forests, mountains, cities. It runs the gamut of artistic style or different environments, and I mean, it's not necessarily an artistic showpiece, but I think its art works.
Those sunsets, man.
Those sunsets are so gorgeous.
Yeah.
So here's what I will say for Forza Horizon 3. Forza Horizon 3 is literally the only game I played this year where I would specifically go to a spot because I just wanted to see how this thing looked, and I would just sit there and I would just awe at how magnificent these landscapes looked. I think it is one of the coolest looking environments I've seen in the game, just in terms of just sheer technical fidelity.
So you talk about the sunsets and how they look very warm and comforting. Would you say they look better or worse than the nice hell glow that you get from Doom whenever you get into hell?
I mean, if you're wanting me to compare Doom to Forza Horizon 3, Doom is the better game. I mean, Forza Horizon 3 is a world I would want to spend time in more because I wouldn't get my intestines ripped out. But
fair point.
But I mean, in terms of execution, Doom looks good in every category.
I have to say, I actually might pick Forza Horizon 3 over Doom, but I also don't think either would be in my top 3.
I am willing to get rid of Forza because I would need strong support from Nate to get it there, but that game deserves mad props for looking as good as it does. And on I played it on the Xbox One version, and I think that Xbox One version of that game looked better than most PC games I played this year. And I mean, it's obviously the Xbox One's not as powerful as a PC, but they've done some wizardry to make that thing look as good as it does. It's impressive.
Does it get any dings against it for the PC version running terribly?
I don't think so. I mean, that's a bad version of that game, but there are other games on this list that have bad versions.
Sure, yeah. I was just checking if that factors into the discussion of best looking or not.
I mean, not for me. There is a version of this game that looks amazing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I would not fight for this to be on the top 3, but it is a really good looking game.
I probably would, but since it's just me, I'm not going to bang that drum too long.
Okay.
But that game looks great.
All right, so Forza Horizon.
I think our host might be MIA at the moment.
Yeah, I think we lost Paul. All right, so Forza Horizon 3 is off.
Yeah, how do you feel about Inside, Nate?
Man, you want to talk about the exact opposite spectrum and looking at some style. What about that super hot? What?
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, you're having some technical difficulties here. All right, we didn't catch literally any of that.
Okay.
For about a minute.
And then you just popped it back in.
Hello. I was trying to throw it back over to Super Hot since that's a completely different genre of game. in terms of this graphical fidelity.
Fidelity.
That's one way to say it.
Super Hot's got style.
Super
So
God's got style.
who put this game on this list?
I would put this game on this list.
I think Nate originally put it, and then I bolded it.
Yeah.
When we
okay.
changed our format. I think this game, like, if we're... So what I said about Forza Horizon 3, if this was best technical, that would be top 3. If this was best artistic, Super Hot would easily be top 3. So, like, it's... Sure, from, like, a technical, raw technical standpoint, like, Super Hot is a little rough in some spots, but man, I love the artistic and stylistic trappings of that game. Like, I think it just looks really cool all the time.
Yeah, super clean and really like vibrant red on white background all the time. Like, you can clearly see everything in that game. And I think I just really like the look of the enemies and the environments personally. But if it's not top 3, I'm not gonna be upset about it.
Yeah, I'm not going to fight super hard for it to be top 3, but I think it's worth discussion because I think despite its technical shortcomings, like as Nate said, I really like the stark contrast of the enemies versus the blank white backgrounds, and I think everything about the way the game moves and like the visual tricks for stopping time and dodging bullets, like that's a visual thing it pulls off that's really impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I give it some props for being effective, but overall, I thought it was kind of a bland and slightly ugly game. I mean, I guess maybe that's what they needed to do to make the action work, but
I mean,
to me,
think
it
it
feels
was
mostly like a
sense.
stylistic choice than anything.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of discussion around the artistic style of Super Hot, and if that style doesn't necessarily work for you, then that's certainly fine, to like bring up. But I don't think that they did what they did because of a lack of ability. I think that they did what they did as a conscious design choice.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're thinking Super Hot's probably somewhere up there, I say let's just leave it for now.
Well, I mean, if I don't think I'd fight too hard for it to make top 3, and if Nate wouldn't either, I think we can probably go ahead and strike it off.
Yeah, I mean, I really like it, but at the same time, we have a big list still, and I don't think that's going to be top 3.
Yeah, I don't think it's
It's
ultimately
kinda-
going to hang, but I wanted to discuss it because I think it looks really cool.
Yeah.
kind of neat if you like the whole 80s virtual reality thing.
Yeah, the menus are cool too.
And maybe I do.
So where do we want to go to now?
Well, when you cut out, Nate and I were about to start talking about Inside, so maybe we can go there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how do you feel about Inside, Nate?
I really like the look of Inside. I think it, just like pretty much every piece of that game, really works to what that game is. I think some of the best looking things in that game are really, really impressive. Like I'm trying to think of the scene where you're marching along in a line with people.
Yeah.
I think that the animation on those people tells you sort of exactly, just through the visual of it, what you're supposed to be doing. And like, that game communicates everything through visuals. So the fact that it's sort of a puzzle game and you have to figure out what to do and it's all visual, I think is a really strong case for Inside for me.
Yeah.
And then there are just some things like we'll probably talk about at some point the ending of that game, and that part just looks incredible and bizarre and awesome.
Thing that happens at the end is probably my single favorite looking thing from any game this year.
It's fantastic.
It's a glorious mess.
Yeah, so I think they do a lot of really good animation work with that, and like I said, the part where you have to blend in with the marching zombie people, and then also just the environment design is just top notch.
Yeah.
I really like that game for this list. I don't know if you're on board with that or not.
Well, that's why I was asking, because it's kind of borderline for me. Like, I think, like, I really, like, it's very clearly an artistic thing, and I really like how the art contributes to, like, just the dour mood for the game from start to finish. Like, it really goes a long way toward, like, conveying the whole nature of that world.
Yeah, I think everything you learn and experience about Inside is communicated almost exclusively through the visuals, and the sound design's good too. I don't want to diminish that, but like the visuals are what make that game, and I think it's all really, really effective.
Yeah.
And Inside was done by the guys who did Limbo. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it a similar style?
It's a similar, like, not bland, but like simple-ish style, but more detailed than Limbo, a little bit more color, but it's a very bleak 2D side-scrolling looking game in the same way that Limbo was.
Okay. Just curious.
The one knock I would have against it is because it is all so drab and bleak, is that it all kind of blends together at some point. Like it's just kind of all hitting that same note, if that makes sense.
A little bit, yeah, but I think you get different shades of drab and bleak, if that makes sense. Like you get the creepy forest, and you get the weird dilapidated farmland, and you get the ruined cityscape, and then you get like the more creepy stuff like underwater scenes, and then the super weird like weird tech stuff near the end with like that huge sound blast that you have to pass through. Like I think there is stuff there that's varied for such a short game. That gives it enough variety that I feel pretty strongly about Inside for this list.
Okay, so that is a strong one for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess we can go ahead and put. Maybe I can talk a little bit about Titanfall 2. I don't think it's going to be able to hang.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
But yeah, I mean Titanfall 2, like I kind of like the setting, and I mean it's going up against a lot of I guess technical showpieces this year, like Forza and Uncharted and Final Fantasy. But it is a kind of a nice looking AAA game. Like they do pretty well with the high action gameplay, and I thought some of the moments at the end of the campaign with like minor spoiler, like some of the time shifting stuff and that kind of story point and mechanic, like they did a lot of really cool visual things with that. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that, but the first Titanfall looked really polished. This one still kind of holds to that standard, and I thought it definitely deserved some props on this list.
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks good. Like, I don't know that anything about it stands out necessarily. It's just like a generally good-looking, quote-unquote AAA game. I mean, I do like its look and its style, but nothing about it necessarily stood out for me in like a above-average way, I guess.
Yeah, I think it probably won't hang with some of the other stuff on this list, but wanted to give it some props.
Yeah, and I think something that is probably a contender for our top three is Uncharted 4. That game looks real good.
Yeah, dog. Uncharted 4 looks good.
Yo. I don't know. I mean, Flex, Nate, I know that you guys played this at least a lot more than I did. But just from the stuff that I've seen, I have a hard time imagining that that's not at least in contention for our top three. But what do you guys think?
This is a strong top three for me. Like from a technical standpoint, you're absolutely right. Like this is, I think, one of the cream of the crop. But they also they work a lot of art in there, especially in the animations. Like I think the way the characters in that game animate is second to none. Like just the little arm motions they do, their fingers, and especially the faces. Like when they're when you're in a story segment and you see the eyebrows move and the eyes and the nose and the forehead wrinkle and all of those little touches, like they're able to actually convey a lot of their story through facial animation, which is insane. Like they're operating on some next level stuff with how they're rendering those characters in this game.
Well, so I'm curious about one thing. Would you say that they have successfully navigated through Uncanny Valley and came out the other side?
I might say so.
Yeah, I think this game is one of the examples we can point to of this is when games started looking like where we weren't thinking about them in terms of games. When it's just this game looks really good and there are actors in the game and they look like this and we don't even notice that it's CG anymore.
Like when we say Nolan North plays Nathan Drake, like you watch Nathan Drake move and you're like, you can see the motion capture shining through. Like this is a game where it feels like actors are playing these characters.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's probably a really high mark for any game to hit, is to come out the other side of Uncanny Valley. So I think we should definitely keep that one as one that's a strong contender for one of our top 3.
That's a strong one for me for sure. And then
Yeah.
the art and environments and stuff like that all looks great too.
Yeah, I think the environments look really good in that game on their own, and even just like the character models and areas you're going through all look really good. But for me, it is the animation that takes this game over the top. So I think it's worth considering for the top 3.
Okay. Let's see. Actually, I kind of want to talk about Final Fantasy 15 for a second. Speaking of, high budget games. Yeah, exactly. Ryan, you've been playing Final Fantasy 15, right?
Yes.
What are your feelings on it as compared to some of the other stuff that you've been playing recently for graphics? Because I'm kind of two minds. Like, part of me sees, obviously it looks great at spots, but then there's other spots where it's like I can tell this has been a game that's been in development for 10 years, whereas some of the environments seem a little more empty in a way where it's like there's a lack of detail, because maybe originally they were making those environments for another console generation, basically. So it's like some of the stuff looks really, really good, but then every so often I'll see a patch of desert, and I'm like, nah, that one looks like it. They might have rendered that sometime back in 2009, and then they never went and redid anything with it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I don't know if it's so much as of a technical dichotomy as it is more of just a stylistic thing, which I'm still haven't beaten the game, so I might not argue this one super hard until I kind of see the package from end to end, but it definitely deserves some props. We were talking about motion capture, like, if you watch, for example, the Kingsglaive movie and then you play the game, like, it may not be quite as cinematic as a movie, but there's definitely, it's definitely just top notch, like, and that's what you would expect from Square Enix, like. And in some cases, the art and style, some of the character designs are goofy, but some of them are kind of cool. Like, the art and style, I think, does do a good job of kind of capturing hey, we're on a road trip through this countryside. And, some of the environments are really pretty, like the coastlines.
Yeah.
I do think, and some of the summon type stuff, like, that's part of where I want to see the whole package, is because there are some areas I haven't visited yet that look like, from the screenshots I've seen, they look pretty amazing. And also, like, if they do more things with the summons, that could be pretty cool. But so it's still a little early for me to give it a final verdict, but it definitely deserves a mention because obviously it's a Square Enix game, and they take extreme pride in their visuals. It's just, for me, I might give it some dings in, like, style, some of the stylistic choices, but we'll have to see how it looks end to end.
Yeah, I don't think that Final Fantasy 15 is going to be one of the games that I'm really going to try and push in the conversation for the top 3. I think that there are parts of that game that look really, really good, but I think that there's just enough other, like, nicks and dings here and there along the way that, with some of these other games on the list, I just don't see Final Fantasy 15 being in real contention for one of those top 3 spots.
I don't know. I mean, I think it could potentially hang, but for me, it's too early to tell, so I'm definitely not going to put a stake in the ground until I fully play through and beat the game.
Okay. So let's see. What have we not talked about? We haven't talked about Firewatch yet, have we?
We can talk about Firewatch.
Let's talk about Firewatch. You guys talk about Firewatch.
What is Firewatch?
What is Firewatch?
The great question of our time.
Yep. I think Firewatch looks cool. I definitely really like the look of it. I don't know that I'm going to put it in the top 3 here. I don't know what you think about that.
It's not a top 3 for me, but I mean, this is definitely a art style game. Like, I think Ollie Moss did all the artwork, and so like, and this is a game that like looks really would look really nice as a painting on your wall. Like, it's just a really cool looking style it's going for, and hangs like, we talked about good sunsets for Forza Horizon 3. Firewatch might have just as good sunsets, but like from a artistic style rather than the technical style, if that makes sense. So like I think it does have a really neat like artistic style, but technically it's maybe a little blocky or rough around the edges, and like I think it like we have other good artistic games on here as well. So like for me, I don't think it quite hangs, but I do really like the way it looks.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think of it as rough around the edges, but like it is a very clean, like colorful art style, which I do appreciate whenever those kinds of games do come around. I think there's specifically one other very clean, colorful art style on this list that I think is just better.
I think I know where it is.
So that would be The Witness for me.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people would agree that looks better than Firewatch
I also like
in general.
The way The Witness looks better than Firewatch.
Because they are kind of similar. Not that doesn't. I mean, they could both be on there, but I don't think they are. So I think I would be fine with taking Firewatch off.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, now we're kind of getting down into we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games that we're trying to fit into 3 spots.
Yeah.
I mean,
go ahead and read those games just to catch people up.
Yeah, so the things that we still have left in contention are Doom, Hyper Light Drifter, Inside, Uncharted 4, and The Witness. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. I think that Doom absolutely should be in the conversation for one of our top 3.
I agree.
I mean, for all the games on here, if I'm going to stick a stake in if I'm going to stick a stake in either Doom or Uncharted 4, which are probably what I consider the 2 best, I think I would say that Doom's probably the one, if I have to pick between those 2, that should absolutely be in the conversation.
I will say, for my part, Doom is the best looking game I've ever played. To be fair, it's the first game I played on a new PC with a 1070 card in it, so there may be a little bit of there may be a little bit of a caveat there. But from my personal experience,
sparkles on that hardware.
Yeah.
What a coincidence! That's exactly how I played Doom on my brand new 1070. It's so pretty.
If you get a new 1070 and play Doom, it's probably going to be the best looking game you've ever played.
Favorite game ever.
Yeah.
But I mean, it does look incredible, and what I like about the way Doom looks is it looks good from all angles. Like it's a technical showpiece. It has art. It has like just tons of art. Like I think all the demon art, all the environment art, like I think all of that looks great. And I think that game's got style for days. Like I think all of the little flares and touches they put around the periphery are just fantastic. Like I mean, even stuff as simple as just seeing like the Doom guy, like his armor being worshipped in a shrine, like that just looks really cool. Like they just do so much cool stuff in every moment of that game, and like I think it looks great from every angle.
I like how his name is just Doom Guy. That's great. So Nate, Ryan, what do you guys think?
I think Doom is technically really good looking. I don't actually really care for the enemy designs.
Oh, it looks great.
Like I don't think they're that interesting looking personally.
You're not that interesting looking.
Yeah, well, that's fair. And I think I would probably
that beard is pretty amazing.
I would probably say the same thing about the environments. Actually, I never found the environments to be that great in that game. That would be my number 5 out of these 5.
Oh,
Ooh.
That's crazy.
Somebody didn't play it on a new 1070.
That's true. I did not.
Somebody played it on a potato.
I think Doom looks. I think that's like whether it wins or not. I think saying 5 out of these 5 is crazy.
Maybe we should talk about.
I prefer all of these others over Doom. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, it's hard for me to comment since I didn't play it. I don't think that's a style I would like, but that's not really worth much because I don't have much to reference off of. So maybe we should talk about some of the other games and then figure out if Doom is 5 out of 5 or 1 out of 5, somewhere in between.
Probably in between.
Have we talked about Hyperlight Drifter yet?
We have not.
Have not.
All right. Go.
And this is another one that's definitely like artistic in style first,
Yeah.
because like it's going for, like, I don't know if you'd say 16-bit or not, but it's like definitely going for kind of the sensibility of that era of games, and it kind of has like a top-down Zelda-ish perspective on the playing field, so to speak. But man, they just soak everything in that world with so much visual flair, like it, and
Yeah.
I think the way stuff moves also looks really cool, and like the enemy designs are really varied and cool. Like I think everything about that game looks pretty sweet. I mean, it's 100% style and and art and that kind of stuff. But I don't know what Nate and Ryan have to add to that.
It does.
Yeah.
Look great.
So Hyperlight Drifter, I've been started taking screenshots of games I played this year, and I put some of them up on my work PC on my Apple Thunderbolt display, and people walk by and they'll see Hyperlight Drifter pop up and they'll be like, "Wow, that looks really amazing." But yeah, like in some of the environments they do in that kind of retro pixel art style, like, again, spoiler alerts here, but like when you come up on top of a snowy mountain and like you see like the skeleton of like a Titan hanging off the side of it, or you walk up over a cliff and they have like a really nicely rendered like I guess environment below you, like it's kind of like a horizon that you can see. Like it's pretty impressive what they do. That game definitely has art going for it in that classic pixel style.
Yeah,
Yeah.
its art is great.
And for my money, of the games on this list that I've played, I like it better than The Witness,
Okay.
which is another game on this list.
I actually also like Hyperlight better than The Witness, though The Witness looks cool.
The Witness, I think, is the one we haven't talked about.
And not much.
Yeah,
Not
so The
much.
Witness to me, it definitely, it definitely has a nice look. Like I have, again, my screenshots that I reviewed and looked at, like I do remember liking the look of it, although it to me doesn't stand out quite as much as some of these other games because it's, I don't know, it's nice, like, but it's not really like a technical showpiece. Like I don't feel like it really adds much to that world or environment necessarily. But we can discuss more about The Witness as a whole later on. But I actually thought that world was a little bit on the bland side compared to some other like puzzle games I had played, even Braid. And visually, like I think it is a very nice looking game, but I don't know that it really stands out to me as much as anything else on the list this year.
Right. So here's my
Realistically.
argument for The Witness, if you'll indulge me.
Objection.
So I think the game looks great just by itself. It's clean colors and really like beautiful palettes that it uses across the island, and all the different environments are all really striking and distinct and all kind of come together to form this cohesive whole island that I think is just really cool and fun to walk around. Like if that game wasn't decent to look at, nobody would be able to stand walking around at that walking speed. And I just think it just generally looks good, but I don't think that that's what takes it to the top 3 for me. I think it's that that is a puzzle game, and it is a huge multi-layered puzzle game, and everything visually in that world has a purpose and is placed very specifically, and all interacts in some puzzle in some way, and the sort of interconnected web of how all that came together to make this giant puzzle island that looks great when at first glance, but also when you zoom in on the details and start to learn what it's doing and see all the different mechanisms it has visually for presenting you with puzzles and hiding puzzles from you. I just think that visually that game has so much depth.
Oh, you mean like the Sun Temple?
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone's favorite section.
Yep.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, that like the visual design plays into the puzzle design.
Yeah.
In an important way. Like I might argue that some of that visual stuff is as much level and puzzle design as it is visual design, but there is a part of it that is very much visual design.
Right.
And like I think that is really important to the puzzles of this game. I really like the art of the way that game looks, and it's really clean and colorful aesthetic. And I also like how the different areas of the island blend together. It's not a huge island, but it covers a lot of ground visually, and the different areas blend from one to another very seamlessly, which I think is really cool. But it also does come across as just kind of plain at times.
Sure.
And that's kind of my main knock against it. Like I do like how the visuals integrate with the puzzles, and I really do like the colorful art of it. But I think otherwise it's kind of plain and maybe too many spots for me.
Right.
So
can I throw out a proposition?
Go ahead. I'm interested.
From what I've heard, I feel like our three, in no particular order, may be Doom, Hyper Light Drifter, and Uncharted.
Oh man, I don't know if I get behind that list.
So
I think that sounds reasonable, but I don't have a stake in the dropped items.
I don't. At least for me, Doom and Uncharted are probably the two that I personally think are the prettiest.
Those two are non-negotiable.
I will also say
objection.
Just in a moment of looking at my own biases. Those games' art styles are just like, I really enjoy that kind of art style. One of them's hyper realistic. The other one is just blood and metal. And
yeah, it is.
So yeah, I mean, I would love to see our finalists have those two games on there, but even picking in between those two, I still feel a lot more strongly about Doom than I do about anything else on the list.
Those two are the two I feel most strongly about. The third game I'm not as particular about, but I feel like we had a lot of joint love for Hyper Light Drifter, and I think it's also a nice stylistic counterbalance to the other two, which are as much technical showpieces as anything.
So I think Uncharted 4 is a lot.
Okay.
I think Doom is a lock.
I still disagree about Doom, but if I'm
what is
alone
wrong
on
with
this,
Doom? Have you seen The Revenant? He's a giant skeleton man in a suit of armor with rockets and a jetpack. Like, what more do you want? He's metal as shit. Like, that is.
I have a feeling
so
that
awesome.
if I had played Doom, I would be on board with you, but I can't really throw my phone in here. So
when you get the Berserk power up and you punch a cyber demon and he freaking explodes, it's the goriest, bloodiest, most magnificent mess you've ever seen. It's amazing. Did you see that shrine worshipping the Doom armor?
I did see that. I was not impressed, but
there is some cool stuff in that game. I'm not disparaging it in any way. I think
rip an imp's jaw off. It looks great.
I know that game is not meant to be taken seriously, but I think most of the demons look really stupid.
I think they look. I agree that they look stupid, but they look stupid in the exact right way you want them to look stupid. That's where this game's visuals are amazing.
Maybe that's the split. You think they look stupid and that helps the game. I think they look kind of stupid and that does nothing.
I have a proposition here. So why don't we take Doom, strike it out, and put NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070. And then we can all agree.
No.
I mean, if there's one thing that I think we can all agree on with all this conversation, Inside's probably not going to make it.
Well,
I think that's where Nate.
If I have
Nate
more
has
support,
the Witness and Inside.
Yeah, those are my two. So my top three would be Inside, Uncharted, and The Witness. So if there's more support for The Witness potentially making this, then I could see Inside going.
Neither of those are in my top three. I probably like Inside slightly better, but it's not a big difference to me that I don't feel like I should be the decider there.
So the thing with me about both of those games that I tried to convey is that I think that their visuals are key to that game, and how it plays. And I think that that's really impressive and important. And I would hate to see both of them get cut.
I mean, honestly, like I said, Doom and Uncharted 4, the ones I care about the most. I could take either of those as the third, but my vote would be for Hyper Light Drifter.
Right.
I like all 5. I actually think these are probably my top 5 for the year. Actually, well,
yeah, all 5 of these are amazing.
Maybe Forza would bump one of them out, but
yeah, I can't comment on 3 out of the 5 games, but if there's a decision between Hyper Light Drifter and The Witness, I would lean towards Hyper Light Drifter fairly strongly.
So Doom, Hyper Light Drifter, and Uncharted 4.
That sounds very.
I think everyone but Nate is in agreement with that.
I think I'm the solo on this one, and maybe I just have to get over it. But man, that feels so wrong.
What feels wrong about it? Do you not?
I think Hyper Light Drifter looks cool, and it gets a ton of points for style. I think Doom is high fidelity with some things that I just think kind of look dumb and I don't care for, but I think Inside and The Witness are both so intentional and well designed and well crafted that it feels wrong to not have one of them or both of them on this list.
I will also say that Doom runs at 60 frames per second and looks that good all the while.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's technically impressive.
I still think we should strike it out and just put the 1070 in there as the best looking game of the year.
I heard it runs well on consoles. None of us played it on console, but
right. I mean, it ran well and looked good on my computer, which is
I think it's optimized really well.
But I mean, if I'm all alone on this and everybody's in agreement that those are the 3, then those are the 3, and I'll deal with it.
So I will say I do think you're all alone on The Witness, because I think I would back Inside more easily, and it didn't sound like Ryan had much love for The Witness either.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're not wrong.
All right, so let's strike The Witness.
Yeah, I feel like we can strike The Witness. All
right, so I think the strength of Paul and Justin on Doom probably means that it makes the list, even with my mild reservations about it. So then I think we just have to pick between Hyperlight and Inside, which I think I'm alone on again.
I like, that's not a huge difference for me. I think Inside looks great, so I don't really care between those. I think that's more between. I know Ryan likes Hyperlight a lot, so I think right. You guys can work that out.
Right.
I mean, the only game I've played that's still on this list is Hyper Light Drifter, and it is a great looking game. Right. I don't know. I guess if you think it looks worse than something else.
It's not that I think it looks worse. I just think that the visuals of Inside are much more impactful and effective to what that game is.
I do agree that Inside's visuals are more meaningful to like the gameplay experience. I think for my personal preference, I like the way Hyper Light Drifter looks better. I think it just has a really cool style, but I do agree that Inside's visuals are more meaningful to what that game is. So I will commentate on that.
And remember that end sequence.
You know, that end sequence is pretty magical.
You're a potato made of legs.
But a great looking potato made of legs.
Yes.
So Paul, any? It sounds like you've thrown out all your stakes in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some screenshots from Hyper Light Drifter. That game looks just stylish as shit. I did watch a Let's Play for Inside, and it made me really depressed. But I haven't actually played either of those games, so I was gonna just let you guys fight about it. But for my money, I do like what I've seen from Hyper Light Drifter a little bit better. But you know, I haven't actually played it, so there's that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tear down Hyper Light Drifter at all, because I do think that game looks amazing. I would tear down Doom again, but I think I've already lost that fight.
Yeah. I wish I could help you there. I don't really. I was actually just looking at some Doom screenshots, and I think it looks kind of ugly, but.
I remember when I played it and sent screenshots, you said they looked cool.
That's true. There were some environmental screenshots that look pretty amazing.
We didn't mention it, but there's like the lighting in Doom is also amazing.
The lighting is really good, but I do think it switches back and forth between cold metal hallways and the red hellscapes that I don't think change a lot throughout, and I don't.
Sure,
I don't
but
think
I would
they look
also say
particularly great.
Sure, but I would also say that inside has a similar, just a lot of dark hallways.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not gonna cry if Hyperlight Drifter doesn't make it. I think it definitely deserves a spot in the top 3. But if you feel strongly that inside.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Or
they
you
both
want to flip
deserve
a coin?
spot.
I don't know. Would you like to flip a coin?
No, we have to settle this.
I'll leave that one up to you. I mean, the only other thing I would mention is that maybe I could help you argue that Doom shouldn't be number 1 if Hyperlight Drifter is on the list, but I can't do that if I haven't played any of the top 3 games. So the only other thing that I can say. Otherwise, I'll leave it up to you.
Um.
I'm not gonna have my feelings hurt if you.
No, yeah, I mean, I'm not either. I'm just trying to think what is the split we can come up with here that makes sense. Justin, did you said you typically prefer Hyperlight Drifter, right?
It's a mild preference, but like, I mean, if insides are third, I that doesn't bother me at all. I think inside looks incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you have a preference, then maybe that should just be the tiebreaker here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very slight preference, but I do prefer Hyperlight. That's as much of a difference as I can get there. I mean, if we were doing a top 4, I think these should be the 4.
All right, let's do it. And Doom is not winning this category.
All right.
I was gonna. I mean, Doom's my favorite, but I think Uncharted 4 should win.
Yes.
Yeah,
I can get behind that.
Yeah, I'm fine with letting Uncharted 4 take its false victory just for the sake of peace.
I'm with you, Paul. Doom's the best. We know.
I don't.
We know,
I don't
and
know,
that's
man.
enough, really. So sure, Uncharted 4,
the best looking game.
Uncharted 4 does
4.
look incredible.
It does. I am not unhappy with that selection.
No, that's good.
So, all right. Well, that concludes our best looking game. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back for best narrative. So we'll see you in just a minute. And we're back. Water cups have been filled. Tears have been shed. I'm eating what's left of a Subway sandwich from 2 days ago. Hopefully I don't die. And we're here to talk about our next category, which is Best Narrative. And the spoiler warning at the top of the podcast is especially true here. For us to talk about Best Narrative, we must talk about what makes it the best narrative, meaning we will be giving away some or all of the plot points for several of these games. So if you are very, very sensitive to spoilers, you might just want to skip over this whole category because we're gonna talk about some stuff.
And I also want to say we originally had called this Best Story, but we broadened it to Best Narrative because we wanted to include characters and storytelling techniques and lore. So like, this is not just plot points that make up a story. Like, this is everything that goes into conveying a narrative about a game.
Right, and you know what that can mean is, you know, you can have a game with a middling plot but extremely strong characters, and that's certainly something that we would want to talk about here. So we're gonna run through a couple of shout outs. The first thing I want to throw it over to is Ryan for him to talk about Fire Emblem Fates Conquest.
Yeah, so I guess 2 main things here. One is that, you know, it's a Fire Emblem game, so if you've played other Fire Emblem games, like, you know, the character writing is usually pretty strong, and I don't think that's much different here. Like, you still have Arthur and Effie and all these, all these really interesting characters and support dialogues in Fates Conquest. But the other thing, and probably the more important thing for Fates Conquest for me, is that it starts out on a really high note with the kind of the setting and the setup. You know, you're this kind of kidnapped child, like kidnapped lord, living with this one family, but your home family and home nation is a different nation, so you kind of have to make a choice. The game's actual storytelling, unfortunately, it does okay, I guess. It's not really very good, but it starts out with a really strong setting and great characters, I feel like.
All right. The next thing that we wanted to shout out very quickly was Hitman. Nate, you wanted to shout out Hitman, right?
Yeah, it's a world of assassination. This game basically makes it in based on the change from best story to best narrative, because there's almost no story in this game from what I can tell.
Okay.
But it's the narratives that get spun in each level can be pretty entertaining, and especially as you being sort of the main actor in whatever narratives you choose to interact with. So basically, each episode is a different level, and each level is populated with tons of NPCs and all these sort of interwoven little plots and side things where all these characters are interacting in different ways, and you can kind of just figure out what's going on at any point and insert yourself however you want. And I think that just creates really hilarious and goofy moments in that game that I would call narrative.
I was surprised you put this on here, but now that I see where you're going, I agree, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, that game is incredibly goofy in all the right ways, and in like the starkest contrast to its cinematics, which are like the most dumb, serious Hitman assassination things ever. And then you load into a level and you're just being like a total goofball running around in this fashion show, dressing up as somebody and walking the catwalk. Like it makes no sense, but it's amazing.
It's good. Yep, I agree.
Yep, that's very true. So Flex, you've already talked about Owlboy once,
Yeah.
and then you talked twice. So now let's go back to the first time again.
Yeah,
Tell us
I
about
fell
Owlboy.
through a weird time hole and jumped ahead a category and accidentally already talked about its story, but that's okay because, I mean, just to reiterate, its story is great. It's a really personal, almost coming-of-age tale of this Owlboy, and I think it's really touching in a lot of ways, but I won't expand since I did talk about it a little more earlier. But it's a great story, and that's really that game's strength.
Yeah. Kind of surprising to see on here Titanfall 2, which Titanfall 1 did not have a campaign. Titanfall 2 does, and Ryan, I guess that's what you're talking about is the campaign points for Titanfall 2?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Titanfall 1, I thought it had a really cool setting, but I was kind of disappointed with the lack of them kind of fleshing it out. You could tell there was some sort of colonial war going on between like a big corporation or government and these rebels. And Titanfall 2, I mean, give it its props. Like not only did it have a campaign, but I thought it was a really, really fun, really cool campaign, and it really like did some work with that setting. So that's my spiel.
Yeah. And the last game that we had that we just wanted to shout out was one that I put on here, World of Warcraft Legion. World of Warcraft Legion started up in, let's just say, Overdrive. The first quest that you go on to sort of like the big cinematic kickoff to the campaign, everybody dies. I mean, everybody. A lot of really important lore characters, and air quotes the word lore there because they've done a lot of things with the lore recently. But,
Thrall.
Yeah, well, I mean, Thrall made it, but, man, poor Vol'jin. Vol'jin didn't make it. King Wen didn't make it. Tyrion Fordring didn't make it. I mean, nobody made it, really. And it was actually impactful the way that they presented that first story quest. But the thing that Legion did that was a little bit different from the previous expansions is it was able to still keep that up as you were questing through the zones. It wasn't like you had one big cinematic opening to the expansion and then that was it. So they did a really good job telling stories in the different zones, but also making you feel like that you're part of a bigger narrative as you end up going through that content. But those are the games that we want to have a quick shout out for. And now we have a few games that we think could be in contention for our top 3 spots. The first game that we're looking at is Doom, again. Then Banner Saga 2, Firewatch, Inside, Oxenfree, Tyranny, and Uncharted 4. So, seeing as how we appear to have none of us have played any of these games at the same time, We've talked about Firewatch quite a bit. Why don't we just go ahead and go back to there since that's still fresh in our minds?
Start big.
Start big. Firewatch.
Yeah.
There's like 2 characters. I mean, how good could that narrative be?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that makes it impressive is that they tell a really good tale with just 2 characters, and they make it a very personal tale about those 2 characters, especially about the character you play, Henry. And there's definitely going to be spoilers all up in here because this is one of my favorites of the year, and I think unless people are just going to go along with that, I know Nate would, but unless everyone else is just going to go along with that, it's going to have to be spoiled to convince you guys. So, spoiler warning here. But like this game to me is the game this year that definitely affected me on a personal level through its narrative the most. Because you play as this guy Henry, who his wife she has some kind of sickness, I forget the specifics, and he basically takes this summer job as a watchtower. I don't know what you call it, but like a person who sits in a watchtower in Old Shoshone looking for fires. And he basically takes that job to just more or less escape the crushing, depressing realities of the real world. And it ends up being this really poignant adventure of like dude trying to run from his problems and then in the end ultimately realizes he can't. And like he gets into all sorts of weird shenanigans and mysteries along the way, but like it all kind of wraps back around to none of that stuff really matters. You have to go back to the real world. And it ends up being a really, I feel like, effectively told and really striking personal narrative that I personally found very powerful.
Yeah.
So is Delilah good or bad?
I don't know. Does it matter?
I mean, I feel like there's a twist somewhere in that game, right?
There is, kind of. So a lot of what that game does is present questions. Yeah, trying to actively spoil it. But a lot of what that game does is sort of present questions or mysteries to Henry, and he kind of gets distracted by them or willingly engages with them maybe more than you even think he should. And the thing that I really enjoy about that game and think about whenever I think back to playing that game is that it handles rising and falling tension so well. It just like has all these great slow builds based around something that he's latched onto at the moment and trying to figure out what's going on, and then it always inevitably releases that tension in at least somewhat of an interesting way, I think, and not always the way you expect. So I think that and the just quality of the writing in this game are enough for me to say it should be in the top 3.
Yeah, and I think that like tension stuff is important. Like to me, like all of that played off the fact of like, oh, Henry's engaging with all of these things kind of willingly, just purely as distractions because he was seeking distractions.
Yeah, it's almost like you get involved in these weird mysteries that don't really make much sense because he's looking for something to get wrapped up in.
Right. And I think also from a narrative standpoint, I think both Henry and Delilah are incredible. I think they're incredibly well realized characters. Like they're 2 of my favorite characters this year. And like they're the only 2 characters in this game, but their banter back and forth is kind of what makes the game.
Yep.
I mean, this is one of those things where I haven't played Firewatch, but I feel like that in order for me to appreciate it the way that you guys are, like the reverence that you're speaking with it, like I feel like I would just about need to sit down and just be spoiled about the whole thing. Because the funny part for me with Firewatch was I never knew what it was, and then it came out, and I still don't know what it is. And you just talked about it for 5 minutes, and I still don't know what it is. Which means I just need to play it, or I just need to go and read a very long entry.
You need to play it is the thing.
Yeah, that's kind of true. Of like, I think Oxenfree is going to have the same issue, especially.
And the thing about that, I would say, is that I could sit here and tell you point by point what happens in that story, and you still wouldn't really understand why it's so good, I think. I think it is one of those things that the experience of it and the pace it goes at and the way it ramps up and releases tension and the specific writing of the characters is what makes that game. It's not the plot points. It's the experience and the journey that those characters go through.
Okay, that's certainly fair. So Ryan, you were kind of leading into saying that Oxenfree is probably going to have some of the same issues in terms of a debate that Firewatch does for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine so because, I played this game after Flex and Nate, and I think I might have heard a little bit of a description, but, basically until you play that game, it's hard to describe what's going on, especially without being, just extremely spoilery.
Yeah, I mean, both games are really adventure games at heart, and you're primarily interacting by walking around and engaging in dialogue and looking at things. So,
yeah, if I told you the kind of maybe some of the suspenseful points of Oxenfree, you totally wouldn't get it the same way as when you're in the game and let's say you're walking through a tunnel or a cave or something, and maybe a light starts flickering, and then something happens that kind of pieces in with the overarching story.
Okay.
But the one thing I will say about Oxenfree while we're talking about it is I got the impression in my playthrough that a lot of your decisions mattered in that game. Things that I picked, people I chose to go with, places I chose to go, the game just kind of went with it. But, I didn't get any indication that if I had chosen something differently, the game would have necessarily tried to hook me back around. I assume it would have just let me go with the different person or in the different direction.
Yeah, I don't really know what the branching paths are like for Oxenfree. I never looked into that stuff, but I will say that my playthrough of it felt very natural with every decision I made. Everything happened everything that happened because of the things I did made total sense, and it never felt like it was getting shoehorned into anything.
Yeah, I don't know that the branching web is necessarily more elaborate or that they necessarily that it's more interesting than other games that have done that, but I think they disguise the machinery under the hood maybe a little better, so it feels maybe a little more like they quote unquote pulled it off, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I guess to clarify, if you're playing a BioWare game, the game might present you with two choices, but at the end of the day, you're still going to be doing the same main quest objective. Whereas I felt
sure, and I wasn't necessarily talking about all BioWare games either.
Well, not necessarily, but I guess that's my point, is that I did feel with Oxenfree, it's hard to say if I played through it again, I'm sure you would still be doing some of the same activities, but I definitely got the sense that maybe if I had picked something different, something more substantially different would have actually just happened. And yeah, the game, because you have to make those choices so quickly, or relatively quickly, it can kind of push you along more transparently.
That's interesting.
Yeah, the dialogue structure for that game is neat. The way it sort of prompts you all the time to either interact or not interact with whatever conversation is happening around you, and it'll pick up and drop things that you choose to interact with very smoothly. If you're walking along and people are having a conversation and you point out something in the environment, they'll sort of naturally wrap that into their conversation, and then once they're done talking about the thing you pointed out, they'll revert right back to where they were and pick up the conversation again, and it works really well.
Yeah. To me, that's the thing about this game is its conversation system. I think that's the thing it does that's really, really unique and interesting.
Yeah, and I would say that there is the element of mystery to that game that I found engaging for most of it. As far as the narrative plot points are concerned, I don't necessarily know that everything about it hits 100%, but I found it compelling to sort of see more of what was going on this weird island.
So is that those are some pretty good arguments. Is that an early candidate for one of our top three already?
For me personally, I wouldn't consider it a top three. My two biggest drawbacks are I didn't find many of the characters that likable or necessarily even well executed. They're all very one note, and I think a lot of them are kind of annoying.
Okay.
Especially Rin. I think that guy's a douchebag.
Who was your who was the person you traveled the island the most with?
Not Rin.
Okay, what was
Whenever
the other
they gave me a
dude's name?
choice, I picked whoever was
Jonas.
not Rin.
Jonas.
Uh,
Yeah, that's
Jonas
who I.
and
Yeah, I
Nona
think it ended
seem
up
to
being
be.
Jonas for me.
Yeah,
I
hung out with
actually-
Jonas most of the time.
I think he's the best character other than Alex.
It's kind of interesting because I actually felt differently. Like when I went in, I was like, oh, this is just going to be like another goofy American kids doing stupid stuff story, and like I thought there were actually fairly interesting backstories to the characters. Like Alex had her family drama, Jonas had his issue, and like depending on how the game plays out, you can actually even see like how things could have happened differently. If like some slightly different, if a few events in the past had changed, like you could see like a different outcome to their lives.
Okay.
I also the other thing I was going to say as a drawback for me personally is that game really requires you to play multiple times if you want the quote-unquote full story. So like there's a weird sci-fi mystery going on that island, and at least in my playthrough, in one playthrough, you kind of don't get the whole picture. Like it ends up being a mostly satisfying playthrough, but I think the game kind of intentionally leaves you with more questions of like, oh, you didn't really quite figure it out. And I feel like it even said something at the end of like, oh, play again to discover more stuff or something like that. So like it kind of encourages multiple playthroughs, which was a little bit of a bummer for me when I finished it because I didn't want to play through it again. And I strongly got this impression that it wanted to fill in some narrative gaps.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would generally agree with that. I felt like my playthrough was pretty complete. I felt pretty satisfied with it, but I would like to know a little bit more about the game's mysteries, and I'm not going to play through it again to find those things. So you do feel like you miss out on a little bit of that stuff if you don't want to play it again. But anyway, I would say that game is sort of on the borderline for me as far as top 3. So I think we should maybe keep it.
Yeah, my other argument is I just think some of these other games are better.
Yeah, I think we should talk about some of these other games first before we cut that.
Yeah, well, speaking of better games, how about that Doom?
Oh, I thought we were talking about better.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
Doom's narrative is way better than Oxenfree.
We
I'm
started
just
out
joking.
with a high bar, and then we just went to the low.
The thing
What-
Doom's narrative does so amazingly well is that, I mean, first of all, like its plot point is like a totally good, like just action game plot points. Like it works. Like the thing it's starting with is good, but then like the characters and dialogue they wrap around that express it in the exact right way where they clearly know it's a campy action thing, and they pull it off with the exact right balance of like camp and seriousness that it works. It's like all of the characters in that universe take it all deadly seriously, but the developers wrote it in such a way that they know that that it's all ridiculous. But like, Samuel Hayden is totally bought in. Like all of the employees at that company were totally bought in that like, yes, siphoning energy from hell is how to solve the energy crisis on Earth. And like you see posters of like employees going to rallies being like, yeah, this is the right thing to do. Like this couldn't go wrong, of course. Yeah, we're on board. It's like this really great setup of like just weird corporate mentality, and like they sell it. It's the dumbest thing about, like, anyone from off the street would walk in and be like, you guys are all insane, but like
And that's what Doom Guy does.
Yeah, and that's what
Yeah,
Doom Guy
and that's
does.
what
So
Doom Guy
then,
does.
yeah, that's what I was leading into, is that you're playing as Doom Guy, and like he never speaks, but he actually has a lot of personality, and he is the same. Like he is very much the player surrogate. Like he is the sane person who's like, you are all insane. I'm going to break all of your shit. And he just goes in, and Samuel Hayden's like trying to be like, no, we can work together. Like this was a good idea all along. And Doom Guy's just like, no, I'm going to break your stuff. I'm going to kill these demons because there are demons here, and I'm just going to do it. And I'm just going to go in and kill it. And they set that up perfectly for the player, and you go in and you do it. And like Samuel Hayden's trying to kind of like work with you all along the way, and you're just like, no, you're a maniac.
Yeah, and like the only point that I really wanted to get in with Doom Guy is Doom Guy is definitely like me at like 5:30 after getting home from work, and I've just had a bad day. Like Doom Guy wakes up and he has had enough of everyone's shit. None of this is right. None of this is real. this control panel is talking, I'm gonna punch it.
Yeah.
You know, and just like that's all he does is he's just like flabbergasted at the just idiocy of these people, and he's just like frustrated beyond belief, and he's like, I'm just gonna tear that thing's throat out.
Yep.
And that's just what he does the whole game.
Yeah,
it's self-aware in a very hilarious way.
Yeah, it's the way it's self-aware and very clearly self-aware in the writing and the imagery is one of the best parts. One of my favorite moments, what you're talking about, is like right at the beginning of the game when Doom the Doom guy gets his armor and he looks at this panel and it says demonic invasion in progress, which is part of that ridiculous self-aware writing. Like, that's a phrase that should not exist. Like, if you're a company and you have to program your computers to say demonic invasion in progress when stuff goes wrong, you done messed up. So like he sees that on that monitor and he starts like punching some things to like figure out what's going wrong, and then Samuel Hayden comes across this monitor and he's like, I forget exactly what he says, but it's something along the lines of like, I know this looks bad, but we had to do it, and you know we can work together to fix this problem. And basically mid-sentence, Doom guy grabs the monitor and just chucks it against the wall, and then he just goes out the door and starts killing demons. He's like, no, you messed up. I'm going to clean this mess up that you made. It's like the perfect thing of what you said. Like, you get home from work, you're tired, like Doom guy just woke up, he's like pissed off at seeing this mess, and he's just like, no, I'm just going to deal with this in the most straightforward, blunt way possible, and it's great.
Oh, goodness. So, yeah, I think Doom's an early contender.
I do appreciate Doom's storytelling.
We have the Doom Squad here. On
it's also like, if you think about so many games that go down the rabbit hole of trying to tell a really elaborate and fancy story, and a lot of times they can end up sacrificing what make video games great. I feel like Doom's story plays very much into serving the game itself. Like, they very much make the Doom guy the most direct player surrogate possible, and like really just get you into the player experience in a way that a lot of games that try and tell stories struggle with.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point to bring up, because there are a good number of games out there that suffer from taking themselves too seriously, but they also suffer from, it's like, you're sitting down to play a video game, but then you have like super serious guy who's telling you it's like the world's gonna end unless we do these things, and it's like, man, that's a lot of pressure on me. Whereas in Doom, you have super serious guy trying to tell you something super serious, and then you just punch the speaker and run outside and start killing demons. Like, in some ways, it's almost like Doom guy is literally 1993's version of every hero that's ever been in any of those games, transported to 2016, where he's running into this big wall of people that are taking themselves way too seriously, and screw this, I'm gonna punch that, I'm gonna shotgun this, and a plasma rifle, and that's just, it's a really funny dichotomy, even though the game is still taking itself just seriously enough to where it's a cohesive story. But at the same time, it's like, I just laugh every time Doom guy really just does anything, because he's just so over the top with it all.
Yeah, he's a great character for not speaking, and Samuel Hayden's a good character too.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that one stays. It's my number 3 personally, so I would keep it for now, and we'll see what happens. But I think that game's definitely in the conversation.
Yeah, that would be borderline for me.
Let's see. Where do you guys want to jump out to next?
I think we can talk
about the Banner Saga.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because I think that's one that can probably go, but I do really like its story.
Because we actually need to cut something from this list, and I think that's a candidate for that.
All right, so I have not played this one.
So Banner Saga 2 is a cool story it's a very straight continuation of the first game. A lot of the same characters, some new characters, a very similar storytelling style and writing style to the first game. And being part of, I assume it's a trilogy? This is sort of the...
it cliffhangs.
Yeah, this is sort of the middle part, but instead of, in some cases in a trilogy, the middle part sort of exemplifies everything great about that game. I feel like this one falls a little flat for me. Especially in terms of the story, it picks up right after some really big events of the first game, and you get to see the sort of aftermath of that, which I enjoyed. But then I feel like not a whole lot happens for most of the game, and then it does cliffhang pretty hard at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of the new characters along the way, but
Yeah.
for the most part, it is like what was the Berserk guy's name? I thought he was
Bulwark.
I thought he was a really cool character.
Yeah,
That's new to this game. But yeah, for the most part, it is just continuing the journey. So it does feel like that middle chapter where they're just kind of like needing to get it to move along. And I still like the characters. I still like the writing. I still like the world they've built and the lore that's there. To me, that's actually my favorite part of the narrative. So like I think it does cool stuff, but I totally agree that like kind of as the middle game, it doesn't, from a plot standpoint, necessarily get the ball rolling as much as it could.
Yeah, I think and like I said, I think a lot of times a middle game or a middle movie or anything in the middle of a trilogy can sometimes be like the most exciting one.
Like Mass Effect 2.
Like Mass Effect 2, yeah. I mean, and
Towers?
I think this one just kind of doesn't do a whole lot other than a couple of characters and a little bit of fleshing out that world.
Yeah, I mean, and it does have some good story beats.
Yeah,
just maybe not as much as it could have.
Yeah.
I would contend that a little bit in that, they do introduce Bulwark as a new character. You learn more about the Menders and like that ending sequence, like you kind of learn like what you get some hints at what might be going on in the big picture. Plus, you have a bit of a showdown. I thought that whole sequence was pretty cool from a story perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely not all bad, but a lot of the stuff I would have wanted it to address more forwardly, it didn't.
I do feel like, I don't know as much from a story perspective, but from a gameplay perspective, because the first game had so many choices that you could make in terms of like building your team, and the story could kind of add and remove characters that they had to kind of water down gameplay, and maybe that also affected the story because there were a few major decision points in the first game that could have it would definitely absolutely impacted the second game.
Yeah. But
I can kind of get that. Like, I don't know. It is a little bit more of the same. Maybe it probably needs to drop, but it's a pretty good game. Like,
it's a really good game. I like it a lot.
It is.
Pretty cool story.
But
I don't want to talk too much bad about it, but I don't.
Got a
think
little
it
bit
takes
of
off
the sequel syndrome, I guess.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of sequelitis, and I also just think most everything else on this list I like better.
Yeah, that's just what it sounds like given the tone of the conversation. It's not necessarily that it's bad. It's just there's some really good games on this list.
Yeah, I mean, if we were doing like a top 6, like I might put it in there, but we got to narrow this thing down to 3.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to take Banner Saga 2 off the table. And let's see, do we want to talk about Tyranny next?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Let's talk about Tyranny, because I've heard a lot of good things about that game.
Yeah, I think I may be the only person on the panel who's played it, sadly. But, yeah, I mean, so Tyranny is, we talked a little bit about Pillars of Eternity earlier. It's another game by Obsidian in that kind of Baldur's Gate style. I actually really enjoyed the writing and the narrative. I feel like that, for games like Baldur's Gate or Tyranny or Shadowrun, while they might have their own interesting combat systems and things like that, really a lot of times what drives it for me is the story. And especially at the beginning of Tyranny, that was the case because it took me a while to get ramped up on the gameplay systems. But yeah, it starts out with a pretty strong setting. You're basically a member of a court led by a powerful Archon. It's called an Archon called Tunon, the Adjudicator.
That's an awesome title.
Yeah, and so the game first off just presents you with like choices about like how you participate in this campaign. Like, you need to take a city. Are you going to do this or this? Like, and so you start off with some decisions, but then as you actually get into the gameplay, like it references back to those decisions that you made at the beginning. And the game, I think it's shorter than some of those, than some similar RPGs. Like I think it's shorter than Pillars, it's shorter than BG2. Like, but there are a lot of decision points in the game, and it definitely feels like, they're impactful. Like whether it's a minor impact, like maybe you make a faction angry at you, or a major impact, like, you're going to side with one army over another type thing. So, yeah, I don't want to get too spoilery, but there are the setting is pretty cool. Like you're basically working for this imperial. It's basically like this imperial conqueror. There's this godlike being named Kairos who's like conquered all of the known world except for this last area, and you're like part of Kairos's army. And within the army, there are these sub factions like trying to conquer the territory differently. They have their own like generals, and so you kind of navigate this. There's some intrigue, and there's obviously some conflict because the generals don't agree with each other. They hate each other's guts, so you have to kind of sometimes take sides with one or the other. And then the character writing, it's an Obsidian game, so if you're familiar with those, the character writing is really good in the way that you interact with your side characters. So yeah, overall, I thought it was a cool experience, and if I had more time, I could even see playing it differently. Not so much to try a different character build, but to just make some different major story point decisions.
Yeah, and I feel like because I played Pillars, I didn't finish it, and Tyranny was one of those things that popped up on my radar earlier this year, but I've just never had any time to get around to it. But I mean, that company's known for doing some pretty good writing, so I'm glad to hear that this game didn't fall on its face once they tried to do something a little different and sort of set it in I don't know if you want to call it an evil world, but it's obviously not all rainbows and sunshine.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that they use that marketing spin, and there is some truth to that. There are definitely a couple moments where I did some things that really kind of sad, but it's because you're a conqueror, you have to get your hands dirty.
Right.
If you don't conquer this person, then your empire is basically going to turn against you. So that's not really an option.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that you made a pretty strong case for that one to stay too. This is getting difficult.
Yeah, we have to cut something eventually.
Yeah.
I guess the one thing we haven't talked about at all is Uncharted.
Or Inside.
Or Inside, you're right, yeah.
I think from my standpoint, I think we'll probably be able to cut Inside, but I don't know if you want to talk about it, Nate.
Yeah, I think that game has a pretty strong narrative, but it may not end up on the 3. So yeah, the game is basically a journey of the main character who doesn't have a name. He's just a boy, kind of going through the bleak, I guess, post-apocalyptic world is sort of the general impression. There's some giant science corporation or government that has some impact on this world, but most of the areas you go through seem pretty abandoned and run down.
Yeah, but I mean that's also one of the criticisms of the game that I've heard is that it's a little too implicit in its plot and its setting. You said post-apocalyptic, and I didn't really get that, but then as soon as you said it, I started thinking about it. I'm like, no, actually, I could see where you would get that, but I wouldn't have thought that at all. And that seems to be a pretty big sort of post-apocalyptic versus not post-apocalyptic. That's a pretty big difference in a world. You know?
And it could be or it could not. They're definitely not explicit about it.
Right.
I think that game's strength is definitely the world building and sort of what you do see that gives you sort of a view into what that world is like. But I could see, I guess, somebody criticizing that maybe you don't get enough because what is there is so good. The big thing for narrative, I guess, beyond that, we could say is that the end sequence is fantastic.
End sequence is amazing.
Yeah.
We can spoil it here if that would make a difference, but I'm not sure that it would.
I don't think it will, personally. I like that they set up this world that is bleak and, there's clearly weird stuff going on in this world that's interesting, but there's almost not enough there. It's very bare bones, and I think that works for the atmosphere and kind of the experience. But I think at least what I got out of the experience was more just atmospheric than it was actual narrative. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Some might say that it's the best 3 visuals of the year.
Unfortunately for Inside, there are a lot of good games visually this year.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I don't think it needs to be on this list. I think it has a pretty cool narrative, and the payoff is great at the end.
I mean, I like its narrative too, and yeah, the payoff.
Yeah.
I mean, this game is arguably made for that moment.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there's enough else here that we can probably cut it.
I think to keep it, you're gonna have to fight that battle pretty hard.
I'm not gonna go to bat for that strongly. So
I do like it, but I would pick
me too.
At least 3 other things first.
I have like 1 or 2 that I think probably should be on here, and then the rest I'm pretty even on. So
I have a feeling Nate and my top 2 might be the same.
All right, so I think the only game that we haven't talked about is
Doom and Firewatch.
Yes, let's talk about Doom.
Sure, let's do that.
I think we already spent about 10 minutes on Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Uncharted 4 is a great wrap up to the Nathan Drake saga, and like a lot of what it does great is what that series has always done great is like the relationships between those characters and the dialogue and like that kind of stuff is, we talked about it some with both sound and visuals, but like the characters make this game, and that comes through in their relationships and their story as they relate to one another. And like Drake and Elena's relationship, like his relationship with his new brother, his ongoing relationship with Sully, and also maybe even most importantly, like Drake's relationship with himself. Like he kind of like Uncharted 4 is almost a game of self-discovery of him being like, no, wait, I really don't need to live this adventurous life all the time. And kind of coming to terms with being more grounded and living a more realistic life, or a more normal life, I guess. And by extension, realistic. And I think the ending of that game is really strong. Like I think they close the book on Nathan Drake's story really, really well. Yeah,
I think the arc that Nathan Drake takes in that game is really, really well done. From sort of the beginning, whereas with Uncharted 3 they had sort of wrapped it up and it seemed like that was the end.
That game was kind of a mess, actually.
Then you start this game with him sort of being out of that lifestyle, but you can see it written across his face through the whole intro to that game, like he misses it.
Right.
And it's very well done, sort of the slow build that they have for him to sort of make this transition back into that lifestyle, and a lot of that has to do with the introduction of his brother as a character.
Yeah. His brother kind of drags him back in.
Yeah, and it makes sense, and it all works based on the past that we all know of Nathan Drake. And then he goes through the arc of the normal adventure of an Uncharted game, and then I agree the ending is strong. The one probably downside I would put on this game is that I found it a little weird that his brother appears out of nowhere and they've never mentioned him in the previous games.
Right.
And then there's all this backstory that you see with him and his brother, and I thought that was a little strange. I don't think it really detracts from the game as itself.
I agree it's strange, but I also think they execute it well enough that it plays.
Yeah, I agree.
I also like the villain characters too. They're villainous in the cartoon villain way you'd want them to be.
Yeah, they're definitely that. The writing is really good.
Yeah.
This game pretty much hits all of the points of what we think of as a narrative.
Yeah. Like this is one of those games where I kept playing because I wanted to see what happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the rare video game that does that for me.
All right. So looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in 3 spots.
Yep.
Can I throw just my overview?
Sure.
Go for it.
My favorites are Firewatch and Uncharted. Those are the 2 I'm going to be a stickler about. My personal number 3 is Doom, but I think Doom is actually one of the best quote-unquote video game narratives that maybe has ever existed, like from a video game standpoint, like in service of the video game. But like I'm not going to go to the grave fighting for that one either. I will say from the games I've played, I think Oxenfree is weaker. I had more, like I didn't really get into that mystery, and I think it has some other weak points that I already mentioned. And then Tyranny I haven't played, but I did like Pillars a lot. So like if it's on par with Pillars, I could see that playing here. But
Yeah.
that's kind of my take. Like Firewatch and Uncharted are the main ones I really want to go to bat for in this category.
Firewatch is the one that I am willing to stand and fight for, however long it takes.
Got a filibuster here.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to stand against Firewatch because I still don't know what it is. So, so if you two are feeling very, very strongly about that, then we can go ahead and say that will be one of the three. I don't know, Ryan. Do you have any just magnanimous, incredible defense that would keep Firewatch down? Okay.
No objections.
All right. So if Firewatch is going to be one of our three, I mean, it sounds like, at least from Flex, that Oxenfree may be a candidate to cut, but
that
I don't know.
would probably be the next one I would cut. I think it's probably on Ryan to come to that game's defense if he wants it on the list.
I mean, I'm not gonna hold things up here to protect Oxenfree. Like, I have it. I will talk about it more if we get to the most surprising category, because it did really impress me in the way that it kind of went. But if you guys both feel kind of ambivalent towards it, then we can cut it.
Yeah.
All right. I'd like to throw out that Tyranny should be one of the top three.
I would not be opposed to that, especially over Doom.
So, what I will say is I have not played Tyranny. I did play Pillars of Eternity, and unless Tyranny is way better than Pillars, I think Doom's probably better than Tyranny. But I did like Pillars a lot, and I know what Obsidian's capable of. So like, I'm not gonna go. I'm like, if Doom is the one that gets cut in favor of Tyranny, like I could live with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ryan's the only one here who's played Tyranny. I really like Obsidian's writing style, so I could see that definitely being on here. If Ryan, would you say it's at least on par with most of their other games in terms of writing and characters and world building and all that?
Yeah, so I played KOTOR 2 and...
One of the best games ever made.
For some of their other games.
KOTOR 1.
Didn't do Pillars. They did KOTOR 1?
I thought
No.
they
No,
did.
they didn't. That was
KOTOR 1.
No.
Obsidian
oops.
did KOTOR 2, Fallout New Vegas, Alpha Protocol.
Alpha
that hot thing,
Protocol,
I still want to play that.
Pillars of Eternity.
Pillars of Eternity, and then Tyranny, yeah.
I mean, I like Tyranny writing-wise probably as much as KOTOR 2. It's been a long time since I played that game, so it's hard to make that comparison.
Yeah,
It's
Keep
very
in
different
mind,
settings.
Nate, that most people don't hold KOTOR 2 as esteemed as you do.
yeah, well, they're wrong.
I would probably say maybe better than that. That's a really hard
Yeah.
way to...
Quick aside, KOTOR 2 with the restored content mod is a completely different game. If no one's ever played KOTOR 2 with that mod, please go do it. It's like $2 on Steam, and it has Steam Workshop support. So it is so easy to just get that installed and put that in and play it. That it really does make a different game with all the stuff that they added back into it.
I mean,
Obsidian
overall...
also did South Park Stick of Truth.
That game got really good reception.
Overall, it's going to be hard for me to argue between these two, but I definitely think Tyranny has a great narrative, and there are a lot of decision points that matter. Like, it's not super long game, and it.
I mean, I'd cast
cool
my vote
setting,
way more
too.
in favor in Doom, but I'm curious how strong Nate feels about Doom.
I think Doom, what it does is really, really good, and I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't be offended if it's on this list by any means. I think it is really good. I'm trying to get a good sense of Tyranny because I have a feeling that I would probably like that game's narrative more than Doom if I knew what it was, but I don't.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you like Pillars of Eternity's narrative more than Doom?
Probably, yeah. I would probably say yes.
And I'm going to take a guess that Tyranny's probably on par with Pillars.
I haven't played Pillars.
Yeah, none of us have played both, unfortunately.
Yeah,
but that's
so
just
it's
gonna
hard
be
to
my
do
gut
that.
check.
So Ryan, one thing that I really like about Obsidian's games and their writing is the side characters that they sort of put with the main character most of the time.
Uh-huh.
Are there any of those that stand out to you that you could just talk about real quickly and why you like them, or is that not really a thing that holds you in this game?
Yeah, so there are, I think there are fewer side characters in this game. One in particular who I liked, who I think is kind of funny, is a guy named Lantry, who's like a traveling sage. So if you happen to check my screenshots or my kind of album for this year, I put a couple of his quotes in there. Actually, I'll read one of these. But yeah, he's kind of a wit, like who jumps in and like, I don't know how super colorful his backstory is. I don't know if you have like the Minsk and Boo of Tyranny. And one of, I think, the complaints from some of the people was that the party system was a little smaller. So instead of party of 6, you have a party of 4. And I think there are fewer side characters in this game, but yeah, there were definitely the parts I enjoyed more about it were just the bigger plot points. And there definitely were some interesting side characters. Like have like one of the local mages joins you, and there are some things about the whole conquest that she doesn't like that she'll chime in on.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to draw the line here when we have, I guess, nobody who's played both of those games. I think Uncharted 4 is probably on this list.
I the only other thing,
the only
I
other
think
thing
we're deciding between Doom and Tyranny.
Yeah.
I would mention, I don't know if this carries any weight, but I think Tyranny is the only game that I have nominated out of these 4. So I would hate to see it cut in favor of 3 games that you guys feel a little more strong, unless, I felt like there was.
You need to play better games, Ryan.
Somehow
I just.
Yeah, Doom would be my cup of tea.
I think, from what I have read and heard about Tyranny, I honestly think I like Doom's narrative better, and especially having played Pillars. But I would be totally fine with Tyranny making this list.
Well, I think that after talking about it for a while, I think we should have Tyranny make it, even though we haven't all played it. I mean, Doom's won a lot. Doom's probably still going to win a lot.
That doesn't have to factor into it. But.
No. But I
Doom's
just
pretty
think
good,
that
you guys.
It is pretty good. But I mean, at least for me personally, the narrative of Doom is probably the weakest part of the game. It's hilarious in a lot of ways, but whenever I'm looking at the quality of the writing between Doom and just from what I've seen and read about Tyranny, I feel like Tyranny's probably, at least academically, the better choice for top 3.
Sure.
So
Doom's a whole lot of fun with its story.
Doom is a whole lot of fun, but it's kind of like the difference between, watching, like a 30-minute sitcom versus watching a multiple hour, like documentary or movie or something. So that's our top 3: Firewatch, Tyranny, and Uncharted 4. I feel like that Uncharted 4 is probably a pretty good candidate for being number 1, but I mean, really, you look at these games and there's a whole lot of Flex and Nate, so decide amongst yourselves.
I think Nate and I might actually have the same pick that is not Uncharted 4.
We might be together on this one.
My vote's Firewatch.
Yeah, same.
I'm not going to stand in the way of that, seeing as how I don't know what it is. What about you, Ryan?
I mean, I thought Tyranny was a pretty cool take on that kind of style of game, and I thought they did do some cool twists with the story, but I wouldn't necessarily call it revolutionary or groundbreaking per se. So I mean, if you feel like a game like Firewatch has a better story than a game like Pillars or Baldur's Gate, then there's probably a reasonable argument that Firewatch deserves the number 1 spot here.
Yeah, I really liked Pillars' story, and I'm sure Tyranny is every bit as good, and I think Obsidian is best in class at making good D&D style narratives, and I really like that someone's out there doing that stuff. Firewatch, I think for me, had a personal effect that was more profound than most games do. I think it hit on a level that a lot of indie games are finding their footing in this area, and I think Firewatch did it as well as any has done it, and for my money, it's pretty special.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then we'll just go ahead and call it. We'll say that our winner for this category will be Firewatch, and our two runners-up will be Tyranny and Uncharted 4. So we're going to take another quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to dive into our most surprising game of the year. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you on the other end of the break. And we're back. Our previous category ended without that much bloodshed, and now we're moving into what we think our most surprising game of 2016 was. These are games that came out that just exceeded our expectations, or just kind of caught the internet by storm. And the first shout out that we really wanted to give was to AM2R. Flex, that's a lot of acronyms.
Yeah, AM2R stands for Another Metroid 2 Remake, and I mean, really the surprising thing about this is that it is a fan-made game, and it's really good. Like, it's a fan-made project that is almost as good as a proper Nintendo 2D Metroid game would be, and I think that's really surprising to see. I mean, not that fans can't make really good stuff, but like, the level of execution that's on display here is really impressive, and like that's the surprising part of it. And it's also a really great way to play Metroid 2 if you have not played that game.
Okay.
Or even if you have, it's a better way to play it. But yeah, it's a really surprisingly well-made fan game, and I had a lot of fun with it.
Okay. Nate, you want to talk about Devil Daggers?
Yeah, Double Daggers is a pretty cool thing. I would say it's surprising because for me, I don't really get into like score attack modes or things of that nature in any games, and that is that whole game. But I definitely enjoyed. I basically got that game and probably would come home from work and play it for half an hour after work. Did that for a couple weeks and just continually enjoyed it and figuring out its mechanics and gaining whatever little menial level of skill I actually gained in that game because it's really difficult. But I was surprised how much I enjoyed it for that type of game.
Okay. What was so surprising about Forza Horizon 3? That it was the third one, Flex.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of my most surprising games of the year, easily a top 3. But I know I'm on an island on this one. But for me, like, I love the Burnout games. Like, they're my favorite driving games I've ever played. And since that franchise was unceremoniously killed back in 2008, like, I basically have not had a driving franchise that I've had any enjoyment for at all. And I'd kind of written off, especially the Forza Motorsport games, as being like these just ultra serious driving simulations and like just these really dry games about tuning sliders and just, really getting into the nuts and bolts of car culture that I don't give a crap about. Like, who cares about cars? But like Forza Horizon 3, like I finally decided to just check one of the Horizon games out, which are a little different from the main Forza Motorsport. And to my surprise, like, it does allow you to treat it as a more fast-paced, arcadey racing game. And I think the open world they've designed is great. I think the car handling and sense of speed is on point. And this is, after Burnout, my favorite racing game I've ever played. And like, I was not expecting, I tried it because I was thinking, okay, there's probably gonna be something here, but like the level to which it grabbed me as just a top to bottom fantastic racing game, and a racing game that can appeal to all different styles, like that really blew me away. Like, I was not expecting it to appeal to my specific driving taste as strongly as it does.
Yeah, and I don't know, it just sounds more like one of those, maybe it was like, was it just surprising for you, or did it sort of surprise the industry and publications as well?
It's probably mostly surprising to me because I think Forza Horizon 1 and 2 were probably pretty similar, and I had just written off that series so hard for so long, and eventually, basically based off nobody else standing up, or like no other driving game standing up and doing anything interesting, I eventually decided, like, well, let me just try it. Like, this is really the only driving game in town anymore because nobody makes driving games anymore.
Right.
So it's mostly for me, for sure, because I have a very particular taste in driving games that was not being met.
Right. All right. Ryan, talk to us about Fury.
Yeah, Fury is one of those games that kind of like popped out of the air for me. It's nice when a game comes as a freebie. I got it as a PS Plus title, and I think maybe I'd heard that some people thought it was pretty good, but jumping in, like, I liked a lot of what that game did. Like, I thought it had a pretty cool style. Like, I like the little side narration and trying to figure out what was going on with your character. And then, it's basically a boss fight game that alternates between like action and bullet hell type sequences, which are things that I kind of get into. So like, I thought that game had a really good style and rhythm, and I enjoyed the gameplay. And it had some pretty cool moments too. So it definitely hit pretty well for me.
All right. So the next thing that we have on our list is Overwatch, which took everything by storm, so far as I can tell, at the same time. But Nate, you put the most time into this, right?
I don't know if I put the most time, but I'll talk about it. I think Overwatch, you could say, is maybe not surprising that Blizzard made a good game, because they do that every time they make a game. But I think you could say it's surprising in a couple ways, in that it's a multiplayer only team-based shooter that really took off with sort of the mainstream, and it's a little surprising for me because I actually don't typically get super into multiplayer shooters, and I've spent more time playing that game than probably any other recent multiplayer shooter that I can think of. Just learning the heroes and all their abilities and how they match up against each other was just a really fun process for me. But yeah, I don't think it's a huge surprise in every way, but I think it does a couple of things that are surprising, and like you said, basically the internet support behind that game is probably one of the most surprising things about it, whether that rates on this list or not. But
yeah, I feel like that game definitely just sort of came out of nowhere, and then it was everywhere at the same time. But Ryan, you've been talking about Mobius Final Fantasy a bit. What was it that you wanted to land it on this list for most surprising?
Well, the biggest thing about Mobius Final Fantasy, even though I talked about it in the graphics and audio categories, is just the fact that it, for me, it was a surprise. Like, it's a mobile game, which that type of game, I definitely don't want to be condescending, like, but that kind of free to play, like, mobile game, like, it tends to be really predatory, and, for a lot of gamers like us on the panel, like, they end up being these simple games with these, like, really kind of nasty money hooks in them. And if you aren't willing to pay, then you can't play the game. And I mean, Mobius Final Fantasy definitely has some of that, but it's pretty friendly to casual players. Like, I played for a few months, and I had access to probably like half of the classes and things like that without paying more than like $5 or $10 at the beginning. And the audio and visual were pretty good. I liked the gameplay system, and I mean, there was definitely some just simple clicking combat, or you could even let it auto combat in some cases. But at the same time, there were actually some gameplay elements in there where you would want to take over to like handle a boss fight and make some strategic decisions about how you play that fight. So overall, yeah, just for a free to play mobile game, I spotted it off of a Square Enix, like, I'm on one of their newsletters, and they just sent it out. It's like, hey, try this out. And I was like, sure, why not? And it ended up kind of hooking me for a good 3 months.
All right.
One of my biggest personal surprises of 2016.
Well, I mean, the word that you were going for earlier when you were trying to describe mobile games was bad.
Yeah, somewhere between bad and predatory.
Yeah. But no, it sounds kind of cool that they've released a game that is Neither one of those things, which is rare in the mobile space. So I can see why you'd be surprised by that. Quadrilateral Cowboy, man, that's a title.
That is the title.
Yeah,
Where's our
that's
best
one of the
title category?
Yeah, seriously. So Flex, Quadrilateral Cowboy. Did you finish that game?
I did.
Well.
I completed all the heists. I stole all the things. This one is surprising because the developer of this game, his previous works, I thought were complete monstrosities. That's maybe a little extreme, but I think 30 Flights of Loving is not a thing that people should pay money for. So based on his previous works, the bar was set really low, and it wasn't until I saw some of this game in action that I was like, okay, like this seems a little better. And I ended up really liking Quadrilateral Cowboy. So the surprise here is 100% that like what I would expect based on this person's previous work is that I would not like this game at all. But to my surprise, it's pretty darn fun.
All right. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it, but I didn't know that he doesn't have a good track record for previous releases.
Well, other people like his previous works. We'll put it that way.
Okay, fair enough. So Ryan, Star Fox, there's not been a good one of those since Star Fox 64. So are you telling me that Star Fox Guard is good, or were you surprised at how bad it was?
So that's pretty great. So Star Fox Guard came in the package with another game called Star Fox Zero, which is also on the next list. But Star Fox Guard was kind of this neat little it's this neat little game that actually uses the Wii U concept pretty effectively. So Star Fox Guard basically was a free throw-in if you bought Star Fox Zero. And the way the game plays is basically so on your Wii U like gamepad you have like a camera, and then on your TV like you can kind of see what's going on with the cameras. So on your gamepad you'll like move cameras around and adjust them, and then you'll basically shoot people in a tower defense style game on your television screen. But it was a pretty neat use of the dual screen concept that sort of justified the concept, and then they killed the Wii U. But a nice throw in with Star Fox Zero.
So Star Fox Zero, a game so bad they had to put another free game with it just so people would buy it. Gotcha. I mean, that game was pretty bad from everything I've seen.
It's not great.
But like you say, the Star Fox Zero is on our next list, which we'll get to later. So, and you've also got down here Titanfall 2, Rod.
Yeah, the campaign. Basically, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that from what I've heard, that campaign is better than anyone was really expecting it to be, just based off the fact the first game didn't have a campaign.
And I mean, I wouldn't have been surprised if it was a decent campaign, but it to me it was a lot more enjoyable than like a vanilla shooter campaign.
That's
like I actually really got into the story, and I thought the action, and they used platforming, they used Titanfall's unique mechanics, and it didn't feel like they were retrofitting a bunch of new stuff in for a single player experience.
Okay. So those are the games that we wanted to give a quick shout out. Now we're going to get down into our games that we think are contenders for being in our top 3, and I want to read those off real quick. Like the previous categories, game number 1, Doom. Hitman, Fru,
Done.
Oxenfree, Stardew Valley, and Superhot. I think that we should probably start with the most obvious one of these in terms of like just the reaction to that game coming out with Doom. When that game, there was a lot of stuff leading up to that game being released. Like they weren't sending out review copies. They had a really horrible like multiplayer beta. Pretty much just negativity swirling around that game for the weeks leading up to its actual release. And then the game came out, and yeah, there's still some issues with multiplayer, but
But who cares?
Well, and kind of the point that I want to make with Doom, with it being the most surprising, is I had literally seen nothing but like negative sort of like energy from every outlet that I could that I read say that this game wasn't going to be any good, and what are these people doing? And
All
you know,
signs for this game pointed to it being an absolute disaster going on at least 12 years of its history. Like there's no shortage of reasons why this game should have been an absolute disaster. And the fact that it turned out not only to be a good game but a great game is like one of the most surprising things that's happened in video games in a long time. Like if you think about, you had Doom 3, which took the series in a slightly different direction in 2004, and a lot of people were disappointed with that game. And then over the following years, like you had a bunch of id's bigwigs like John Carmack leaving to go to other companies. They put out Rage, which was not really received that well. And then you had, on top of that, they started working on what they were calling Doom 4, and they, kept talking about that kind of in hushed tones for a while. And then finally, when they showed it off, like people started calling it Call of Demons because they were basically chasing the Call of Duty style shooter that was kind of the cream of the crop during the 360 era. And they ended up working on that game for years and just scrapped it outright. So they rebooted this new Doom game from the ground up. And so they basically had two games that weren't well received. They've lost a lot of their lead talent that made Doom that made id what it was in the 90s. And then in the lead up to this game, the one beta they put out was a multiplayer beta, and people thought it was terrible. So, like, you had every single sign, and they didn't release early review copies, like you said, Paul. And so, like, literally every single sign was pointing to this game just being a burning trash fire. And it came out and was amazing. And then on top of that, for me personally at least, I have never given a crap about Doom. I've never been a Doom guy. Like, when this year started, I didn't think for a second that I was going to even entertain the notion of playing this game. So I went from thinking this game was going to be a terrible mess, and even if it was an okay, serviceable shooter, I'm not a Doom guy. I probably wasn't going to play it anyway. And the game came out, got good reception. I realized I had to try it, and I fell in love with it. So the turnaround from 0 to, whatever astronomical number you want to think of, like the gulf between expectations and how much I like this game, off the charts. Like, this game is the definition of surprise in every way possible.
yeah, I mean, there were a lot of signs that hold true for any other game release that says, hey, this is probably not going to be a good video game, And it's almost like the company was just going down just a checklist. It's like, all right, how do we make this game look like it's going to be real bad? Let's release a beta that's horrible. Let's not send out review copies. Let's have it come from a studio that the last time that they made a good game was in 1993. And it's just like, you add all that together, and it's like, even if Doom was just a good game, even if it was like a 7.0, that's still surprising.
Yeah, if the game had come out and worked and been functionable and not terrible, like that would have been a surprise right there. But the fact that it's one of the best first-person shooter campaigns ever made, like, it just makes it orders of magnitude more surprising.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the odd step and just go ahead and put that this should definitely be one of our top three. We don't have a lot of games to go through here, but I think that this one should probably be. Just go ahead and say right off, this is going to be one of our top three, and then the rest of the list can just sort of go after the other two spots.
Oh, Doom wins this category. Make no mistake. If there's one category that Doom unequivocally wins, other than maybe Game of the Year, it's this one.
Yeah, I agree. This is the category that Doom wins without any reservations.
There's literally no way to argue the surprise factor of Doom.
Yeah, I was even just looking up because I remember when they first showed the game at E3 2015, I believe. I remember they showed a gameplay trailer, and it was like the most dull-looking thing ever. And I just pulled it up and was watching a second of it while you guys were talking, and they don't show off like the speed of that game in any way. He's just like very slowly lumbering around with a shotgun, blowing things up, and it's I remember seeing that trailer and being like, man, that looks really dull, and that's not what the game is at all.
No, literally everything they showed about this game beforehand looked terrible. Like, there was every reason to believe this game was not going to be good. And then how well it successfully emulates what made Doom a popular thing in the first place. Yeah, the speed of the action, like you were hinting at, and just all that stuff is so on point. It's great.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how bad a job they did marketing this game.
Yeah.
All right. So we're just going to go ahead and say that Doom's definitely going to be in our top 3 and an early contender for number 1. But we still need to go through the rest of the list. Nate, Flex, you guys want to talk about Hitman a little bit?
You want to talk about another game that had all signs of being terrible?
Yeah, that also had a lot of stuff even pre-release that hinted at this game not doing well. But even just personally for me, the fact that I am playing an episodic sandbox style stealth game and loving it is super surprising for me. I think Hitman, I don't even know when the last games have come out. It's always had
2012.
Yeah, it's always had people that like those games.
Yeah, people really like Blood Money.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, aren't some of the Hitman games well received? Like, I haven't followed along with this.
They are. I don't think they've ever had a huge fan base, but they definitely have people who like those games. I think one of the things that makes it surprising that this game is so good is the episodic nature of it.
Right. Like when they first announced this game was going to be episodic, people were not happy.
Yeah, people were throwing minor revolts on the internet about this game becoming episodic, and I feel like some of the marketing around it was a little weird. I don't remember specifics, but
I forget the details, but they at some point completely changed the release and structure of this game. I couldn't tell you the details, but yeah, like the feedback was so negative the first time they announced it that they ended up changing a bunch of things.
Yeah. So it kind of had a weird lead up to this game launching, and people were really not happy about it being episodic, but it turns out that's one of like the big really good things about this game, like that ended up working really in its favor. Yeah. And it's just like a super, super well made game. I haven't really played any of the other Hitman games, but like I think the sandbox nature of this game really works in a really surprising way.
I mean, similar to Doom, and I think Nate's in the same boat with me in Hitman, is like Hitman was one of those like old stodgy, like clunky stealth games that makes me not like stealth games. So like this was a game that before it came out, I had no interest in playing it because I don't like stealth games that much. And like after I saw enough good reception, I realized I had to try it, and like they did a really good job with this game.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, and I definitely remember a lot of, very similar to Doom, there was a lot of just real negativity around that release.
People did not like Absolution at all, so even Hitman fans were really sour on this one coming out, and then when they announced it was episodic and like all of that other business mess around it, like this, to a lesser degree, but similar to Doom, had a lot of signs pointing to it not being good. Like the studio just didn't really seem to have it together. And I think with this Hitman, they have really honed in, like it almost feels like a back to basics in a way, because like they really just hone in on the sandbox gameplay, and they nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next up we have
Make
Fruit.
no mistake, this is number 2 on this list.
I'm not going to go that far, but talk about Fruit anyway.
Fru is surprising because, like, this is a Kinect game in 2016, and it's
exactly.
good.
That is the reason. It is a good Kinect game.
So if I had come to anyone and said, "Hey, there's this Kinect game coming out. Do you want to play it in 2016?" What would your response be?
No.
Yeah, and for this to be good is incredible. Like, who would have thought, right?
Yeah, it's totally bizarre that this game exists and it's good. It doesn't make any sense in any way.
No, it doesn't. It's crazy.
I mean, I guess that is sort of an argument that just writes itself. Hey, do you want to play a Kinect game in 2016? No. It's like, but you will.
How about this one that's really good? Like, that is 100% the surprise in this game. Like, it's. I think that's a pretty big surprise. Like, no one would have predicted that in the beginning of 2016.
No, you're definitely right about that. Short, sweet, to the point. I like it. It's a Kinect game that's not literally burning your house down right now. So, Oxenfree is what we have next on the list. We had this up in an earlier category, right, Ryan?
Yep.
Yes. Narrative.
Yeah. So, was that the most surprising part of the game for you, or was there something else?
I guess for me, Oxenfree. the thing that surprised me most about it is, I mean, aside from the fact that nobody could really tell me what it was, whenever it first started out, like my very initial impression of the game was like, oh, this is going to be like a boring Americana like story, about some dumb kids like having a party on this island, and like it turned into something a lot more interesting than that for me, and like actually became like a pretty fun and engaging experience. Whenever I first started, I picked it up because it wasn't very expensive, and people were saying like they enjoyed it. But the first few minutes of the game like really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But then I found myself getting into it. And the way like it handles like some of the suspenseful moments and some of the storytelling, I thought was cool.
All right. Did anyone else play Oxenfree?
Yeah,
Nate, did you?
Both Nate and I did. I
Okay.
actually personally didn't really find this game surprising at all. I mean, I think it's a good game, but I feel like it did exactly what I thought it was going to do.
Okay.
It's a story-driven game where you make choices, and I knew that going in, and that's what it was. And it does some of that stuff pretty well, but I wouldn't call it a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah, I think in terms of expectations, I didn't have a lot for this game, and I did enjoy it, so I guess you could call it a little bit of a surprise that way, but, I wouldn't say it's a big surprise for me personally.
Okay. Well, let me tell you about a game called Stardew Valley. This
All right,
was...
let me kick my feet up. All right.
Kick your feet up. Uncle Paul's going to tell you a story of a time that he went to the farm, and then he lost most of the summer. So Stardew Valley came out this year. It's one of those labor of love games released by some dude who'd been working on it for a very long time. And basically it is one of those, if you took Harvest Moon and then you added in the survival elements that you see in a lot of the Minecraft-y kind of games or everywhere in Steam Early Access, then and you put a ton of polish on it, throw in some narrative that's actually impressive for what it is, in a world that just gets odder the more that you sort of like delve into it. That's pretty much Stardew Valley in a nutshell. I have never played any of the Harvest Moon games. I've never played any of the Animal Crossing games, which has also been sort of compared to those as well. And I was actually listening to the Bombcast when Dan Reichert got on a soapbox, and he didn't get off for like 20 minutes. Now, I'm not going to do that to you guys. I'll just say that he didn't stop talking for a while, and I went and looked, and the game was only $15, and I'm like, well, I've never played one of these. I was in the middle of I was in a sort of a break with the games that I was playing, so I just kind of bought it on a whim and downloaded it, and holy bananas. Surprising is definitely the right word, because I could tell it had a quality to it whenever I first started playing it, but it really didn't take long before it's like, every in-game day you would wake up and you would find out something else about the world or about the actual game system that's like, wait, there's combat in this farm simulator? There's an adventures guild? Okay, that's interesting. And then you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, by the way, here's a big overarching goal for you to work towards in regards to fixing up the community center. And it's like, okay, really, I thought this whole game was just about planting parsnips. And now you're telling me every in-game day when I wake up, I have 72 different things I could be doing right now. And the way the game does it is it paces it very well, in that it just introduces one thing at a time to where you're not ever really overwhelmed, but you're never bored. You're never stuck in a loop. And that's the other thing that was the most surprising to me, was I was just thinking, hey, I'm going to play this game for, maybe 5 or 6 hours, get settled into a nice loop, and then just that's kind of the whole game until I'm tired of doing that loop. And that's not the way that works at all, because there's just so much stuff to do, and you also have weather variations and crop yield variations and all these other things to where you're never really just doing the same thing over and over and over again. So yeah, I was really surprised at how much I liked it, but I was also really surprised with the reception that it got, because pretty much it came out to no fanfare and no marketing, and it didn't take long before I started to see that, pop up in a lot of different places for the publications that I follow. So I thought it was a pretty big surprise.
Yeah, that was definitely like a take the world by storm kind of game.
It's this year's Undertale.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually probably a pretty good way to say it, though, because, I mean, Undertale was another one of those games that, at least in my mind, came out of nowhere. I don't know what kind of marketing it had leading up to it, because I didn't pay attention. But then all of a sudden, it's like, why are there so many goats all over the internet? You know, and it's like, oh, this is Undertale. Oh, what, you know, so...
Yep.
That said, I still have no interest in playing it.
That's fine. I mean, and it's definitely one of those games to where if you're not a fan of that genre, this is a really good one of those in that genre. But if you just don't like the genre, then that's fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is I know I don't like that genre, and even if this is like better executed than say Harvest Moon, like I've played Harvest Moon and I don't like it, and like even a better one of those does not appeal to me.
Yeah, okay. I picked it up based on all the fanfare, and I played 5 hours of it, and the only thing that was surprising to me was how much it made me want to go to sleep.
It's so peaceful. It's such a peaceful game.
Or boring.
Yeah, I'm in 125 hours, so I definitely did not find the.
Did you fall asleep anywhere in there?
I mean, I did pass out a couple of times, but that was mostly whiskey related, so it's fine. But yeah, so that was just my little personal rant for Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
So the last thing that we have on the most surprising game list is Super Hot.
I'm gonna say I thought Super Hot looked awesome before it came out, and then it came out and it was awesome. Yeah. So I don't know how that plays in here.
I don't know if there's much of a surprise factor there.
Yeah. This is probably an easy cut.
Actually, Super Hot's kind of on our next list too, so I would say it's a very
my
easy
argument
cut.
for it being off the next list is going to be the exact same.
Yeah, maybe this should have just been a shout out. I don't know, but I thought Super Hot looked neat, but it ended up being easily one of my favorite games this year. So that's sort of where the surprise comes in for me. I definitely expected it to be good, but I guess the level of how good I found it was a lot higher than what I expected.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little better than what I expected, but I think it was like 2011 or 2012. They had like a free browser version of it, and I thought it seemed really awesome then. So
yeah, the game's been around for a while, and it's always looked cool. So I don't know that it hangs with some of these other ones, but I was surprised by how much I liked it when I did play it.
Okay.
Yeah. But we can think that one can
and
go.
how much you paid for it too.
I felt totally fine with the amount I paid for it.
I was, But anyway, I think that one can go.
Yeah.
We can cut Oxenfree unless you guys want to keep it.
I think that's the first one I would cut.
Yeah, I would take that off too. I think this comes down for me. I would put Hitman and Doom on there, and then it comes down to Fru versus Stardew Valley.
Yep.
I mean, from an outsider's perspective, the Hitman thing kind of is a head scratcher for me because I haven't been following the fanfare or anything like that, but just watching, Square Enix as a publisher over the past 5 years or so, like it's not surprising to me at all that they made, a respectable reboot of a game and did it. And, even if they did it in an episodic way, like nothing about that seems really striking to me.
There definitely was some like pushback on that game before launch, but I think even if you remove that, for me personally, it's one of the biggest surprises of the year, just based on how much I enjoy it when I don't think it's really my type of game typically.
Yeah, a lot of the surprise is that A, the last Hitman was not well received, and then B, that this is so much better than what Hitman has been. Like, even Hitman fans say this is far and away the best Hitman. So it's a leap in quality, and also a leap in quality in a way that broadens its appeal for people like me and Nate who have never liked not only Hitman but stealth games in general. So it's a huge step up from what that series has been before.
I mean, I feel like that Hitman is definitely an easy one to put into the top 3 for a lot of the same reasons that Doom is just from how screwed up and bad that development cycle was very early on before the game actually came out, that it has no right to be as good as it is, and I think by that definition, Hitman should definitely be in that conversation for the top 3.
So did we take Oxenfree off?
That's what it sounded like. I'm gonna do it.
I just want to make sure everybody's okay with that.
Scream if that's wrong.
I'm just kidding.
No objections.
I mean,
So
in
the
between,
Connect game or the spiritual successor to Harvest Moon?
the only thing that I'll say
Decisions.
with Stardew Valley is that I had never heard of Frew before today, and Stardew Valley came out in a way that was really big, really fast, and I wouldn't have heard about it if the internet wasn't talking about it, because obviously, I mean, you guys know what kind of gamer I am. I'm not going to go looking for a farm simulator in Steam, so I don't know. I feel like that one had a bigger splash onto the wider internet.
At the same time, nobody's talking about Frew because nobody owns a Kinect because they've written it off that hard.
Yeah, that game actually almost got buried based on just the sort of low expectations that a game like that starts with.
Yeah, imagine how big of a hurdle it is for a Kinect game to actually get played by anyone.
That being said, with Stardew Valley being the phenomenon it was and how much you enjoyed it, Paul, I'm totally fine with that being.
I'm actually fine with Stardew Valley being on this list as well, but I think Frew is incredibly surprising.
I think it's definitely surprising.
I really like the Undertale analogy for Stardew Valley too, because you think about much like Earthbound was one of those kind of like clickish SNES games that has like a cult following, and Undertale kind of revived that in some ways. Like Harvest Moon and Harvest Moon 64 had a ton of love, and me and my brother enjoyed those. He played Stardew Valley. I haven't gotten around to it, but it sounds like it not only did it revive the or that genre or that niche, but like it also kind of added some like modern depth to it. Some people have different opinions of that, but it seems like by and large people think it did that formula very effectively.
Yeah, and I was it's funny because I was actually going to Wikipedia to just kind of look up Frew, and it's like, no, I've got a great argument. Stardew Valley has 40 references and pictures and a whole lot of words. Frew's like 6 words in Wikipedia. That's it. There's like nothing there.
Yeah. Nobody still knows this game is out there. It's amazing.
That is so hilarious.
No, it dampens the surprise factor. There's like a Connect eclipse over Frew.
Yep.
No, I'm totally cool with Stardew Doom here.
So, I still think that we made a lot of really good arguments for Doom to be the runaway winner with this, just with everything that went on with that.
Yeah, I can't argue against Doom.
We are crazy people.
Yeah, there's no argument to be made against Doom here.
Great, I love it.
All right, so for our most surprising game of 2016, we have Doom with the runners-up being Hitman and
I'm surprised.
Stardew Valley.
Color me surprised at how awesome Doom is.
So do you guys just want to roll in the most disappointing game, or do?
Let's do it.
I'm down.
Because that did not take us very long. So these are the games.
This is the flip side of most surprising.
Yeah. So these are the games that we weren't happy with at all. Some of these games may be repeated from earlier lists. That's because different people are going to talk about the different parts of them. So one of the first games on our list is Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, which we actually had up in best looking game. Well, now it's in most disappointing game because Nate was very disappointed in Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. So Nate, why don't you talk about that one a little bit?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say exceptionally disappointed, but I didn't like it enough that I didn't finish it. So I think that rates as worth mentioning. I haven't ever been like a huge fan of Fire Emblem, but I did really enjoy Awakening, the previous one, and got Fire Emblem Fates Conquest and started playing through it. And while I generally liked the battles and combat of that game, Fire Emblem does that thing really well. I basically really didn't like anything outside of combat, which is like base building stuff, and I thought all the dialogue and plot stuff was bad. So that disappointed me to the extent where I actually didn't even finish the game. So that's why it's here.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm glad you left it as a shout out because my counter argument would have been you've never been a Fire Emblem fan, and this is still very much a Fire Emblem game.
It is, and that's fine. But I didn't like it enough to finish it, so that's why it was disappointing.
So the next thing that we have a shout out for is Fury, which was on our most surprising game for Ryan, but for Flex, it was one of his most disappointing.
Ryan was surprised. I was disappointed, and it's, to be fair, it's mild disappointments. And
Expectations game.
Yeah, it's all expectations, and it's a personal one as well. But yeah, like I mean, I had heard it was this cool boss rush thing, and I ended up having a number of problems with it. I think everything outside of the boss fights is very poor, and I think that game also has some control issues. So like, I think it could have A, been more focused on the just bosses, and B, those parts could have been tighter. So for me, it was a little bit of letdown, like based on what I had heard beforehand. But I mean, not so much so that like I don't think it's one of the most disappointing games of the year, but it was a personal disappointment for me.
Okay. Sheltered. I don't know that I've heard of Sheltered. Ryan.
Yeah. So Sheltered, it's an interesting thing. Let me tell you a story here. And I mean, the good news is that 2016 I didn't feel like was really a year of crushing disappointments for me.
Yeah, I actually do want to echo that I don't think there were really many disappointments this year.
But I wanted to call out a couple shout outs. Sheltered is actually a lesson in the risks of backing games on Kickstarter, which my experience with Kickstarter has been very good so far. And I found a lot of games and some publishers which I've either enjoyed or I felt like were kind of mediocre. But Sheltered is a game that I backed on Kickstarter at sort of a higher level last year because I thought the concept looked really cool. So, normally I'll just back at you get a copy of the game for $15 or whatever the normal retail price is. But I went a little higher on this one because I thought it looked really cool. And development cycle was really troubled. And then the final delivery of the game ended up being not terrible, like not absolutely horrible, but sort of more like a glorified Flash game. Not really worthwhile. So just for me, it was a bit of a personal disappointment that I wanted to mention. But it is a 2016 game. Like, you can find it on Steam. I think it has a really interesting style, but the gameplay was pretty poorly executed.
Okay. So is that what's worse, Sheltered or Star Fox Zero?
Sheltered by far.
Okay.
Star Fox Zero, for me, like, I went in with the expectation that it might not be great, that it probably wouldn't be bad or terrible, but it might not be great. And unfortunately, it was the epitome of mediocrity. It basically. It basically was it like at its best, it was kind of like Star Fox 64 with maybe smoother controls, but it intermixed, like, especially in your first playthrough of the game, it intermixed all these new vehicles, these motion controls, like these really jarring, unnecessary things. And then even at its best, like it just didn't really update the formula. The story is not a huge factor in the Star Fox 64 game, but it did have this kind of cool setting and some cool beats, and like it was just kind of like a very safe, very dull reboot in that sense. Like, the graphics weren't particularly impressive. Like, they're just I do feel like that franchise could have some life if they modernized it and rebooted it effectively, but Star Fox 64 was kind of like this safe version of a reboot with really painful motion controls thrown in left and right.
Huh.
I will quickly say that this game does not seem like a good game, but also Star Fox games have not been good for literally 19 years. So for me, saying a Star Fox game is not great doesn't seem that disappointing. But I get where you're going.
Well, I mean, that's like saying a Harvest Moon game hasn't been good for 15 years, right? Then Stardew Valley comes up and reminds everybody why people loved.
Oh, if Star Fox Zero had been good, it would have been a good surprise for sure. But I think being bad does not make it really disappointing.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I said I expected it could be, and that's basically what it was really mediocre. It's still a little disappointing enough to make a shout out here, but that's why I don't feel like it's like a crushing disappointment.
Yeah.
So Super Hot, really?
Yes.
I will say that I thought Super Hot looked awesome before it came out, and then it came out and it was awesome.
So, I mean, for me, Super Hot was a game It definitely looked cool, and I kept my eye on it for a long time. The things to me that were disappointing about Super Hot were it's been stubborn about its price. It launched at $25 and I haven't seen it on sale below $15, which I think that's really high considering the kind of amazing indie games. I mean, you can buy Stardew Valley and play it for 200 hours for $10. But Super Hot, you'll get, unless you get really into that new game plus stuff, which I've heard really mixed reviews about, like you'll get about an hour and a half out of it. I thought the setting and the look weren't that great. Gameplay was definitely fun, all 60 minutes of it. But it's just a game that's kind of like the developers are really proud of what it is, and like it is a cool concept. I would love to see it expanded and offered at like a better value, but it's just a little too full of itself.
All right, I can't say that I agree with all that, but that's why it's in the shout out section. So we're gonna just keep on moving into Total War Warhammer. Flex?
This one is a very, very personal pick. So
I was about to say,
bear with me here.
anyone expecting the game to be good?
Is it just disappointing because they didn't call it Total Warhammer?
Well, yes.
That's the most disappointing part.
That's exact. No, that actually is really disappointing that you mentioned it. Like this game should have been Total Warhammer. They messed up. Like that's a. I'm calling it Total Warhammer too.
Just drop the mic.
Yep, that's really where this is at. So for me, like this may be the best Total War game. A lot of people seem to think so, and from the Total War games I've played, I'd probably agree. For me, this game was the personal realization that maybe I just don't care about Total War. And that's disappointing because it seems like it's something I should really like. Like, everything about Total Warhammer seems like this game should be for me. And I just can't get into it. And I've struggled to find a good explanation for why, and it kind of baffles me. So, like, this is a very personal disappointment. Like, I would never nominate this to be on our list because I know it's just me. But for some reason, like, this game was the one that made me realize, like, I just don't think this franchise does it for me. And it should, but it doesn't. And that's a bummer for me.
We need to have like a strategy game rehab here.
Yeah, I mean, I've played some of the Warhammer series, or rather some of the Total War series, and I think, I liked what I played, but it was fine. Then I saw this game come out, and I'm like, boy, if I had infinite time, I might get into it. But
like I said, it's probably the best Warhammer or Total War game. I don't know, probably the best Warhammer game too. Not a high bar. But yeah, I think it's a good game. It's just I think it was that personal realization that just not for me.
Yeah, and that's pretty sad. The last thing that we have on our list of shoutouts is not even a game. Rather, it is an entire ecosystem. It's a console. It's kind of a company. The Wii U. Man, what a disappointment.
I initially put this on here as a joke, and then we left it because we all agreed, and I don't think it should be allowed to be nominated as a top 3 winner unless, maybe we want to go down that road with it not, and I say that because it's not a game. But, maybe we would want to go that road, but like, the 3DS had a pretty good year, but Nintendo totally dropped the ball on the Wii U. Like, their output for the Wii U was what, like Star Fox Zero, Paper Mario Color Splash, and
Sharp FE was a Wii U game.
Yeah, Sharp FE is like the one good Wii U game they put out all year, and a lot of the other stuff they put out was just kind of bad. It's like their output of games was very small, and what was there was mostly bad.
Yeah, and I have a bit of a personal story, which, again, no crushing disappointments this year, and I kind of knew this was a possibility, but I got my Wii U close to the holidays late last year. They started offering pretty good bundle pricing, and Mario Maker was out, but I knew going in that the system could be on its last legs, and I was hopeful that Nintendo would keep it going a little bit more. I knew Star Fox was coming out. And, I really enjoyed Sharp FE. I enjoyed Mario Maker. So I don't want to slam the system. Like, I enjoyed the system, but it is definitely disappointing to come in on the system at kind of late in its life cycle and just not have a decent library of games. And then they basically drop support.
Yeah,
They unofficially or officially dropped support for the system, like, sometime this year.
Yeah, and it's really just this year and that's what makes it disappointing is I think the past 3 years there have been a few good Wii U games every year, and then it was somewhere in the spring this year they more or less said like, yeah, we're done making Wii U stuff, and it's just the complete drop of support.
Yeah, and it's disappointing, and I really do think that system overall is been a disappointing system, but yeah, like you say, this just kind of snuck in partly as a joke, but then we all went, yeah, that's not.
Yeah, I like the Wii U overall as a system, but I don't think you can argue that 2016 was a bad year for the Wii U.
Yeah, I should have maybe clarified with the shout out that Wii U's 2016, because like overall it's had good games and has been an okay system, but this year it has literally done nothing.
Yeah, especially with the Switch on the horizon and it being a thing where you definitely know the Wii U is done. So it's not like you can say, oh, maybe they'll still have something for next year. But, I mean, I guess technically they have Zelda.
Yeah,
that's never actually coming out ever.
But anyway.
So those are our little shout outs that we wanted to do. Like we said, it's not a huge year for disappointing games. We've actually only got
good year.
Yeah, we've actually only got 4 games that we're putting up to nominate in our I guess this is the Hall of Shame rather than the Hall of Fame.
And I will say even those 4 games were kind of a stretch.
Yeah. So the 4 games.
I chose not to make any nominations on this list.
Yeah. So
this is Flex and Nate's category, most disappointing games.
Yeah. We have Darkest Dungeon, Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, Grow Up, and XCOM 2. Yeah. I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll let you guys hash this out. I have seen a whole lot of negative stuff about XCOM 2, just in general. That's the one game that I feel like out of this list of 4 that I've seen the most sort of vitriol is not the right word. A lot of people were very unhappy with XCOM 2 once they actually sunk their teeth into it. So I think that for my dollar, that one's probably should be talked about.
It's a weird one because that's actually probably the best game on this list.
Oh, it's easily the best game on this list. It's the only game on this list I like.
Which game are we talking about?
XCOM 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is a weird one because XCOM 2 is one of my favorite games of the year, but I was also disappointed in it because, like, I don't think it really stepped up anything over the original XCOM. So, like, when they release a sequel, like, you want there to be a reason to move on to the sequel, and I don't know that this game did that. Like, it's still fun in the ways that XCOM is fun and good, but I think the few times where they tried to do something a little different, I don't think it really stuck, and I think for the most part, it's just kind of just a very bland, straightforward sequel. And then on top of that, I think it's even buggier than the original was, which is kind of poor because the original was also buggy. So, like, I think there's a lot of technical issues there that really drag it down. And I also think that last mission was really obnoxious.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I stand on that. Like, it's still one of my favorite games of the year, but the XCOM Enemy Unknown was a great reboot, and to follow it up with a game that is at best more of the same, I think is disappointing.
That's kind of interesting, and I mean, it's definitely an expectation thing. I figured for you guys it was probably that. To me, it was a little bit the opposite because I was late to the boat on XCOM Enemy Unknown, and I played it and enjoyed it, but like I didn't really get into it the way that you guys did. But XCOM 2, I did a lot more. And I mean, part of that's probably just because the formula was still really good. But between
that's
the two
ultimate
games,
thing is XCOM 2 is still a good game because the formula is good. But
yeah, it really is.
I do like some of the stuff they added, though.
I don't think everything they added in that game is bad. I think some of it works.
I really do not like randomized research rewards. I hate that.
Yeah, I could see that. It worked out well for me in my game, so I don't have a problem with it, but I could see how that could be frustrating.
I also think the game has some pacing issues because this happened to me, and I think I remember it happening to at least one of you. I feel like I talked to someone about it, but I maxed out my research well before hitting the end of the story and just kind of had to click through a bunch of stuff. Like, I think that game has some pacing problems.
Yeah, it definitely does. And like you said, that final mission was not only... ridiculous and weird and long, but also that was when the game started really messing up technically for me.
That final mission took me like 2 hours, and it rewards a very different party composition than every other mission in the game does. So the rest of the game does not prepare you for that final mission. And then something about the technical nature of that final mission, like the longer the mission went on, I guess it just gets bogged down, because I hit my worst bugs like an hour and a half into that mission. And there was actually a moment where I thought I was completely boned and that a technical issue had crippled me to where I was going to have to restart that mission. And like, I had to make suboptimal move choices to get around the bug that happened to me, because the thing I wanted to do, it disabled grenades. Grenades totally broke for me in that mission, and so I had to abandon use of grenades, which was one of my key things in my party, and so I had to make some poor decisions and try and save scum my way through that last bit because bugs crippled what I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's very disappointing, actually. I knew the game wasn't great, but I didn't know it was a technical mess.
It's a big technical mess.
At launch,
yeah.
I played it through twice, and the second time I played it through was, I think, maybe close to a month after the first time, and it felt like they were starting to patch things up. But you're right, at launch it was pretty bad.
Yeah, it was bad.
That was really frustrating. A game with such high expectations.
Nate, do you want to talk about Grow Up?
Sure.
There's some history here, Paul. That's why we're laughing.
Yeah. Grow Up was the follow-up to Grow Home, which was one of the best games of last year.
Wait, was it on the top 10 list
It's
last
one
year?
of the best games of 2015.
Records show that.
I really, really love Grow Home. I think Grow Up is a sequel that did not capitalize on what made Grow Home great, and added some stuff that didn't add anything to the game. I just think that the level design in Grow Up doesn't work for that style of game. And a lot of the new abilities you get similarly just don't make sense for that game. So that's why I put it on here. I still enjoyed playing it, but I just think it was a poor follow-up.
So what I will say is that I remember saying on some previous thing that I thought Grow Home was too thin of a concept to make a full game, and if you tried to build it out, like, it was a short game that shortened to the point and did what it was going to do. And I didn't think what it did was robust enough to actually make for much more than the kind of tech demo-y thing it was. And the feeling I get from Grow Up is they tried to flesh it out, and it fell on its face.
I mean, you're right that it didn't work, but I don't think that means there's no way it could work. I think they just made the wrong decisions, personally.
Maybe. I still don't see how it could work, but...
I 100% believe that you could take some of the concepts, especially like the climbing and stuff from the first game, and make a really good, larger version of that. I mean, you may have to add some other stuff to it. I don't know, but I'm not a game designer. But I refuse to believe that is an impossibility. I just don't think that they made the right decisions for Grow Up.
So the high expectations from Grow Home have left you disgusted and with a bad taste in your mouth.
Not disgusted,
from Grow Up, just utterly disappointed. now you recognize the whole franchise for what it is.
No.
I mean, I'm not gonna say I told you so, because that would be
I'm totally
amazing.
I'm just
totally joking. I have no skin in this game. I didn't even play the first one.
I don't know if I would even put Grow Up on this list after we already had the other three, and I still don't know if that might be the one I would cut out of these four. So, but we can go through the other one.
I was originally gonna say I don't know which one we're gonna end up cutting, but now that we're talking, I think Grow Up's probably the one that goes.
Yeah.
All right.
Flex was like, yeah, my expectations were low already.
Yeah, this is the inverse of what I said about Super Hot. I thought Grow Home was not impressive, so Grow Up not being impressive is not supporting.
All right.
Darkest Dungeon is an interesting one because I think it has some really amazing ideas, and I think it does some things really well. And the disappointment, because like coming in, I thought it looked really cool, and it was actually one of the few early access games I considered buying. And when I first started playing it, that was kind of vindicated. Like, I thought it was really cool. The disappointment of Darkest Dungeon is all of that initial wow factor slowly wears off as you play the game, and they really, in my opinion, they really bungle what that game could be as it goes. They basically just stretch it out and drag it on way too long. That game is like a 60-plus hour grind that it should not be. Like, the mechanics in that game would make for a tight, excellent 15-ish hour game if they did it right, and I think they just made it drag on way too long. So it was one of these things where I got really excited for that game because everything in it looked cool, and when I started playing it, I still felt that everything in this game is cool, and then once I realized the pacing and variety and just all of that drug on way too long, I got more and more bummed out. Like, this for me was the game that bummed me out more than any other game I played this year, because it could have been amazing and it wasn't.
Yep.
I didn't have the high expectations that you did, and I did end up finishing the game, but I can get behind that. Like, and one of our other friends who played the game, I think he did like 2 rounds of bosses, and for him, he's like, yeah, that's about as far as the game should have gone. Once I did the second round of bosses, I was like, well, I'm close enough. I'll put in the extra 15 hours to finish it. But you're right. I mean, it didn't. I enjoyed it enough that it carried me that far, but it definitely should have done something different or just stopped earlier. Like, it should not have done what it did.
Yeah. And that's totally the disappointment. Is it
copy
this game
paste the
could have been
formula with
amazing.
some incremental number bumps for 20-hour sections.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Just hearing that made me sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I want games to be good, and like this game should have been really good. And like
it does make that
there.
strong first impression.
Yeah, like you see the good game in it. Like, there is a good game in there. They just didn't quite stick it.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, I think that's probably the definition of disappointing. It's like, I can see where this could have been so good, but then it just was so bad.
Yeah, like, this was my biggest bummer of the year for sure, because yeah, you want it to be good, you see it. Oh man, yeah, it made me sad.
So how about that last game then?
Okay, so Deus Ex: Mankind Divided. After the previous game, Human Revolution, which was really, really good.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed Human Revolution. I was excited about this game when it got announced, and excited to get it when it came out. And I started playing it, and I think it's still an okay game, but I have a lot of reservations about it. I think that the core plot and storyline and characters of the game are pretty weak, and that's a sad thing to say about a Deus Ex game. And then also just found the progression system, the upgrade paths you could take in this game to be so lackluster. I just did, like this is a game where you earn skill points and put them in things to gain new abilities, and every time I got a new skill point in this game, I looked at the menu and I was like, I don't need this. Like, none of these abilities are exciting. I just don't care. I'll put it in something because I feel like I have to. And it was really a disappointment for that to be the case in an RPG that's about building out your character and gaining new cool cyberpunk abilities. Like,
Right.
they really missed the mark on the upgrade paths for me.
All right.
I also know that, or I think there were some microtransactions in there that were not good.
There were. I didn't look at any of them, but I know there was a way to buy like in-game currency to upgrade faster because you need those pointless upgrades more, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, it was silly.
I also remember you telling me that the ending was maybe not.
Yeah. That game was one of 2 instances this year where the game ended, and I was like, wait, what? That's the end? And like credits are rolling, and I'm just sitting here like, okay. The game ends really weirdly, and I didn't care for it.
Yeah.
That game has a bunch of things that I ended up not liking about it, which was a shame because I really like both the first Deus Ex and Human Revolution are both really, really good games.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing is I think like the original Deus Ex and Human Revolution were both incredibly good. Like I really like both of those.
Yeah.
So to see this one be at best just like a mediocre follow-up.
Yeah.
So it sounds like to me from the conversation that Grow Up is going to be the one that's saved from the Hall of Shame.
Yep.
And Darkest Dungeon, Deus Ex, and XCOM will be our top 3.
I don't think XCOM wins. Otherwise, I don't care.
You kind of hurt my soul with everything that you were saying about Darkest Dungeon. So
yeah, I think Darkest Dungeon takes this.
That's my vote. I think Deus Ex also sounds disappointing.
Yeah,
so I wouldn't be opposed to that winning, but my vote's Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, unless somebody wants to argue that Darkest Dungeon shouldn't win, I think that would be my pick.
Didn't nominate any of these games, so I am convinced that you were most disappointed by Darkest Dungeon.
Yeah, Darkest Dungeon.
I was definitely most,
is most disappointing to me of these because, like, Deus Ex and XCOM 2 were both, fairly, both sequels to games I really liked and weren't as good as the previous ones. But Darkest Dungeon was like a new thing that I was really thought looked really cool and was actually really excited about when I got it.
Yeah.
And it makes a really strong first impression, like Justin said, and I was like, man, this is gonna be great. Yeah. And then like only a couple hours later, I was like, oh god, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. The first 2 or 3 hours I played of that game, I thought it was gonna be one of my favorite games of the year. And then the next 2 or 3 hours, I was like, okay. And then the next 2 or 3 hours, I was like, how long is this gonna go? And then the next 2 or 3 hours was, I don't want to do this anymore. So that progression was just soul crushing.
Yeah, it was not fun.
All right, so our winner, as it may be, Darkest Dungeon, followed up by Deus Ex, Mankind Divided, and XCOM 2.
Right.
And that is the last category that we're going to hit today. We will be back tomorrow with more video games to talk about, including our Game of the Year discussion. And just a bit of housekeeping, we're going to create an ordered list for Game of the Year for top 10 because everyone loves lists, everyone loves ordering.
And we really love fighting.
And, so we're sitting here with
frowny faces on.
With 21 games that we're going to try to get an ordered top 10 list out of, which should be exciting. So we're going to go ahead and... Oh, that's not a bad idea.
Yep.
Go ahead and go back through and reset all the winners. Let's see. Where do we start at today? Best looking?
Yep.
So our winner for best looking game was Uncharted 4. Our winner for best narrative was Firewatch.
Say runners up too.
You want to do this too?
Yeah.
All right, fine. Best looking game. Winner was Uncharted 4. Runners up Doom and Hyper Light Drifter. Best narrative, our winner was Firewatch, followed up by Tyranny and Uncharted 4. Most surprising, winner was Doom, followed up by Hitman and Stardew Valley. And most disappointing, Darkest Dungeon, followed up by Deus Ex and XCOM 2.
Word.
Big day for Doom and Uncharted 4.
It is a big day.
And Firewatch.
I guess Firewatch was partly yesterday.
Yeah. So
luckily tomorrow won't be a big day for Doom.
Tomorrow will be the biggest day for Doom.
I hate to tell you, Ryan.
Let me tell you about a little game called Stardew Valley. All right, just saying. All right, well, we're gonna punch out of here,
and we can hear about all games that have great gameplay that we haven't heard about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like
we will see you guys on the morrow with our Game of the Year ordered list.